Well, this took a lot longer than it should have. Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my examination of the Star Wars franchise under Disney. Now, I'd like to start off by apologizing for the quality of the first video. Effectively speaking, I wanted these to be like impromptu, completely unscripted rants. Finally went over the last video, and I realized that the quality of it is really shit, so... For those of you who are still sticking around with me in order to basically examine these movies, I basically will try to do better on this one. I gotta say that basically it has taken me far longer to make this video than I should have, because I wanted to make this video basically almost immediately after I finished the last one, but for some reason, I honestly found myself at a loss for words. And I don't know why, because this movie is one of the things that I've wanted to talk about with somebody in person for years, but it seems like anyone who is in my circle of life basically cannot actually see this movie for the garbage that it is. It seemed like everybody that I met was satisfied with this movie. But so I'm basically just gonna try to force myself to talk about this movie because this has been built up in my mind for so fucking long. I just don't know why I couldn't actually form the words to talk about this thing, whatever it is. Okay, so you guys remember when I basically told you that I predicted that in response to the prequel trilogy, Disney was going to play it as safely as possible and double down on all the nostalgic imagery of the original trilogy in order to buy the goodwill of the fans instead of earning it. Effectively speaking, as soon as the first trailer dropped for this movie, I gotta admit, it started out strong with the reveal of this cloaked hidden figure and this mysterious voice talking about how there's been an awakening in the Force, and boom, this cloaked figure has a cross-guard lightsaber. That's something new. That's something that we haven't seen in the franchise ever. I mean, me personally, I feel like it kind of sort of diverges away from what lightsabers are supposed to be. They're a lot closer to samurai katanas than they are actual straight up European swords, but at least it's something new. Then suddenly we get the nostalgia money shot of the Millennium Falcon flying around, and suddenly we see X-Wings, TIE Fighters, and basically friggin'... So we got the X-Wings, we got the TIE Fighters, and then we basically have the Stormtroopers, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's exactly as I predicted it would be. I didn't think it would be to this caliber. I thought we would have, stuff that would look like the original trilogy. I didn't expect that we'd be getting straight up the original trilogy again. It's like, guys, I mean, the prequel trilogy established its own identity by showing us all kinds of myriads of different cultures, different people coming together. It had stuff that looked familiar, but still looked distinct enough to be its own thing. What you guys have here is recolored TIE fighters and X-Wing fighters with the engines cut in half. Seriously, how do the friggin' X-Wings even work? So, it just basically seems like that was off to a pretty shitty start, and then the Stormtroopers. The fact that the Stormtroopers are in this movie and basically, they're back. They're once again the faceless, nameless grunts that the good guys are going to be shooting at. That just made me, just really tilt my head and wince, because it's basically it makes me wonder, is the Empire somehow not done? Has the war that basically should have ended over 30 years ago literally been going on for these last 30 years? Because I don't know how I feel about that. Basically speaking, we'll get to this point as we go deeper and deeper into the movie, but ever since I first saw the Stormtroopers introduced with these movies, and the X-Wings and the TIE Fighters shooting at each other, I really can't help but wonder, what exactly has changed in the galaxy? What exactly have our heroes won? What are the fruits of their labor? What is it that they fought for? Because what is it that is different about this trilogy from the original trilogy? And so far, I had nothing. So, I didn't like the idea that the stormtroopers were back because, surprisingly, I had the audacity of wanting something new. I wanted a new set of enemies. I wanted a new feel, you know? Like, say what you want about the battle droids, they are so friggin' distinct from the stormtroopers. And I get that. The stormtroopers in the prequel trilogy were revealed as clone troopers, and that's basically how this massive Imperial army came about. But at least that was a huge distinction. So, anyways, I was tense. I was basically like apprehensive about the entire thing. And then, of course, the trailer that showed off Han and Chewbacca with that whole Chewie, we're home kind of thing. I admit that I appreciated that. It kind of made me smile, but then I started thinking about it. The only reason that Harrison Ford agreed to do this movie was that he'd be killed off. And it's like, shit. Are they going to kill them both off? But I was still hopeful. I still wanted to give this movie a chance because the nostalgia fanboy in me, wanted to, at the very least, see Han Solo, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker reunited for what could be the last time. So, I was willing to give it a chance. However, it was clear from the get-go that the politics surrounding this movie were literally trying to basically throw up their hands in defense and discredit anyone who had a problem with this movie. Case in point, Finn. When he was revealed in the trailer, he was wearing stormtrooper armor, but he's black. And for some reason, people started to question that. It's like, oh, black stormtrooper, what are they doing this for? Like, what's going on? I personally feel like this entire story was exaggerated. People were curious about this character. What did it mean that we had a black stormtrooper? Did that mean that these stormtroopers weren't clones? Well, according to the expanded universe, they hadn't been clones for a while now, so that should have been, like, implied. But suddenly, the defensive snowflakes decided to take the narrative that anyone who questioned why this stormtrooper was black is obviously a white supremacist. Because look out, it's the boogeyman of white supremacy coming in and being all racist, hating on progressive values, when it's like, as far as I'm concerned, I just basically assumed, okay, maybe this guy is a rebel spy. Maybe he had to put on stormtrooper armor just like Luke and Han did in the original movie. Did anyone else think of that? And so it's basically like, maybe we were just curious as to who this guy is. Maybe the fact that we are curious about it means that we're curious enough to see the movie to find out more about him. But nope. Anybody who questions this is automatically a white supremacist because, God forbid, a black person be a stormtrooper. It's like, yeah, black people can totally be the bad guys that are going around hurting innocent people that we're using as a metaphor for Nazis in this movie. And, what was our argument again? Exactly. It's like, it's so fucking stupid for anybody to get defensive over something like that, but it's clear that this was the narrative that they were trying to push from the get-go. It's like, oh, you basically got a problem with, like, our casting decisions, our diversities? Well, fuck you, bigot. But I basically tried to ignore that because I wanted to give the movie a chance. Truth be told, I honestly didn't think I was going to see the movie opening weekend until I basically got harassed by someone that I absolutely cannot stand. I have no idea why this person is still in my life, despite the fact that I've tried to cut him out like a bad tumor, but he just keeps, like, flying in proximity of me. He literally would not leave me alone until I agreed to go see the movie, and it's ironically not for the reason that you think. I didn't see the movie on opening night, on opening day. I don't do opening week. I don't do opening days anymore. At the best, I will do the day afterwards, during the day, when everybody is, like, still either at work or busy with doing something else. I don't do night shows. I do early day shows, because that's how you avoid major crowds and whatnot. And I gotta admit, I was taken over by the nostalgia. I even bought myself one of those collector cups with the stormtroopers on it, and it's like, yeah, I'm going into this, and I'm actually doing something that I thought I would never do again ever since 2005. I am seeing a legitimate Star Wars movies in theaters. I saw the Clone Wars movie, the pilot for the Clone Wars series, and it's like, yeah, that was okay, but it was really forgettable. It just felt like 3 episodes sliced together that they decided to release in theaters. But it's like, here we've got an actual Star Wars movie, and it's going to be numbered, and it's going to be showing what I thought would never be shown, the continuing adventures of Luke Skywalker and whatnot. Even though I basically knew that that wasn't what I was in for. Like, literally speaking, I knew the attitude that this movie was going to take when it came to the original trilogy characters. They were going to be in it, but they weren't really going to be there, so to speak. Because, like I knew about the whole passing the torch BS from that this trilogy was, like, obviously going to go for, the simple fact was, they couldn't have the original characters be all that big a presence in this movie because that would, of course, overshadow the new characters. So, I remember watching the trailers, the best that we saw of Luke Skywalker was his hand reaching up and touching the dome of R2-D2, and you see that his hand is robotic. We hear that voiceover narrative of him saying, "The Force is strong in my family. My father has it," showing Darth Vader's melted mask and whatnot. I have it, the hand on R2. My sister has it, that brief glimpse of Leia. Unfortunately, my sisters didn't pick up on that because maybe they're just not attuned to this stuff as I am. They basically said, I don't think that Luke Skywalker is in this movie. Like, and I'm like, we see him in the trailers. Didn't you notice that he's there with the hand on R2? And the narrator is like, I literally told them he's in this movie, but he's not going to be in this movie. I literally made a bet with my sisters that day. I guarantee it. The only time we're actually going to see Luke in this movie is right before the movie ends. This movie is going to be all about trying to find Luke Skywalker, and as soon as they do, we're going to see him, like, turn around and face the camera, and that's where the movie is going to end. Because then they basically can claim that, oh, they've got the next movie to show off Luke Skywalker and what he's been up to. But I guaranteed that that would happen because by that point I knew J.J. Abrams. I knew what kind of filmmaker he was, and I just know that the shit that he is. So, before we actually start talking about the movie itself, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you have, even those of you who haven't studied film, a lot of you have to have heard the argument by now of spectacle, or sometimes known as style, over substance. The debate between the substance of a movie and the spectacle of the movie. Now, what is spectacle? Spectacle is special effects. How pretty the movie looks. The action scenes. They're the stuff that make the audience go, wow. The substance of the movie is basically like what makes the audience think. The themes of the movie, the characters of the movie, the conversations between the characters of the movie, the characterization, how everything is informed, how the lore works, how everything is tied together into a cohesive narrative, how basically the parts of the movies that show that there was some thought that went into them. Like, take this for example. The Fast and the Furious movies. I'm not a fan of them, but I personally think that those movies emphasize spectacle over substance. The Transformers movies are literally all spectacle and no substance, and they're also all style and no substance. But basically you take a movie like well, let's say Jurassic Park, that had groundbreaking technology that changed the scope of filmmaking forever. That's a movie that definitely tries to balance its spectacle and its substance. It's a little bit lopsided, but I feel like the substance in Jurassic Park is still strong, and it's definitely strong in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It's just that you'd have to actually know a thing or two about the franchise in order to appreciate it. So, but anyways, the thing that you don't want with your movies is that you want your movies to have good substance. You don't want them all to be spectacle, because then your movie is just dumb. You don't want to make a dumb movie. You don't want to make a movie that, at the best, people can say, oh, it's just popcorn entertainment. Switch off your brain and enjoy it for a while. Especially not when you're making a Star Wars movie, because when you make a Star Wars movie, you've got people who are invested in the story that you are trying to tell, and they are going to literally hold you to whatever it is you do to a T, and you better not fuck that up, because if you fuck that up, you're an idiot. The biggest kind of idiot there is. And that's basically one of the reasons why I don't like J.J. Abrams' movies, because J.J. thinks that he's the next Steven Spielberg. He doesn't even remotely understand who or what Steven Spielberg is. Steven Spielberg makes groundbreaking achievements in the filmmaking business. He literally creates new filmmaking techniques and changes the scope of what filmmaking is. J.J. Abrams is entirely derivative. He has not had one single original idea ever since he became a major filmmaker in Hollywood. He's basically derivative to the nth degree. He cannot basically make anything new for himself, and he emphasizes flashy special effects and mystery boxes more than actual substance. The mystery box aspect is what he thinks is substance, but considering that he never has any intention of opening those mystery boxes and revealing what the mystery actually is, and worse, if his mystery is literally so mediocre that people can predict what the mystery is going to end up being, yeah. That's J.J. Abrams to a T. In a complete nutshell, he is just derivative, he's trite, he's a hack. He really is the most overhyped hack in Hollywood. I'd say that he's the worst filmmaker that we currently have in our generation when it comes to big name movies. Fortunately, he is beaten out by someone who is arguably even worse. So, I recently proposed a thesis in which that basically shows what a unique aberration the Star Wars franchise is, because the Star Wars franchise doesn't just balance spectacle with substance. The original Star Wars movie, and hell, even the prequels, use spectacle to inform the substance. Jurassic Park does the same thing, because effectively speaking, the meat and potatoes of the Jurassic Park franchise is the dinosaurs. Of course, you're going to have good special effects in order to make those dinosaurs real, so that you can make the point about what these dinosaurs mean, what they represent. With Star Wars, you have the opening text scroll that basically, gives you an idea of what this universe is. It explains that there's an evil empire, that it's a period of civil war as a small band of rebel freedom fighters try to fight against this overwhelming juggernaut of an evil empire, and worse, the empire has this super weapon. We'll get back to this later, and it basically gives us a brief overview of where we are coming into the story, but we don't have the best indication of how this universe actually works yet until the very first scene. An enormous planet with 2 moons that's clearly not planet Earth, and a space cruiser flying into the scene, being pursued by an absolutely ridiculously enormous Star Destroyer that's shooting at it. And it's right then and there, that is a spectacle-driven shot that informs us how this universe works. That right there is spectacle informing the substance. It's the use of special effects to build the world around that we are seeing on screen, visually as well as through dialogue. We get a sense of how this world works. We get a sense of how the bad guys operate, with the stormtroopers wearing white armor with the black undertones, and basically how they come in and just start shooting everything, and the guys that are on the ship, the rebels, they are wearing basic clothing and helmets. They are clearly not prepared to stand up to a military force like this, which is why I friggin' get so irritated when nobody ceases to make jokes about how stormtroopers can't aim for shit. It's like, we get it. The joke is a thing. Can you please stop repeating it? Because it kind of stopped being funny a while ago. And then basically we see Darth Vader, and it's like, yeah, we basically learn everything that we need to know for this movie just from his own entrance. He's a guy, big black suit, he's very dangerous looking, and literally the next time we see him, he's holding a man off the ground and crushing his windpipe with one hand. This is not a guy to be trifled with. So, basically speaking, throughout the original trilogy, the spectacle informs us of what kind of world we're living in. When we get to Tatooine, we see Mos Eisley. It's dirty. It's run down. It's a place where only the scum of the universe would gather and have their meetings, or basically hang out, because they know that it's basically pretty lawless out there. And basically, like, from then on, we see the interior of the Death Star. We see the interiors of the Star Destroyers. Everything is sleek. Everything is clean. Everything is shiny. Then we get to see the Rebel base. It's in an abandoned temple on a forest planet, a moon, actually, and we see that all the Rebel ships are dirty and basically falling apart compared to the Empire ships. We get the sense that the Empire is much more heavily resourced than the Rebels are. These are literally the underdogs going up against the massive juggernaut of the Empire, and basically the spectacle informs all of this. Then in the sequel movies, we see a backwater planet like Hoth, and then we see like Dagobah. These are planets that nobody would really care about, so of course the Rebels are going to hide out on planets like this. Then we see Bespin, which is like the only planet where we see an actual functioning and thriving society with that's based on an economy, instead of just like criminals hiding out or rebels using it as a place to hide. And yet, even then, the underside of Bespin, of Cloud City, is still kind of dirty, so it shows that everything looks clean on the outside, but underneath it's dirty. It's bad. Bad things happen on Cloud City. I think that I've made my point with that. The original trilogy, the prequel trilogy does the exact same thing. Like, a lot of people complained about, like, all the CGI and how different it looks from the practical effects of the original trilogy, but the CGI was an intentional design choice, because you realize that going from the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy, everything looks sleeker, everything looks shiny, everything looks like it has more professionalism thrown in, and it's like more heavily funded, because this is the time in the galaxy where everything worked. It was a time where basically, like, people could afford the nicer things in life. They didn't have to basically, like, depend on rough and shambling, falling apart equipment. The Empire didn't have a monopoly on all the best stuff. Everybody could afford to buy good and clean materials. Their ships, they're bright and shiny. Everything looks like it's made out of metal. The battle droids, they basically like showcase that these mega corporations have millions of dollars worth of resources to just throw into a completely expendable army. This was done intentionally to show us that in the original trilogy, the galaxy doesn't function anymore because the Empire is a totalitarian regime, but in the prequel trilogy, the galaxy still worked. Because people weren't being oppressed. So yeah, that's how the spectacle informs the substance. Hell, even the people who have the stupidest complaints about the lightsaber duels in the original trilogy, the fact that they are, quote, over choreographed, that's the spectacle informing the substance to begin with. Because what we saw in lightsaber duels in the original trilogy was two old men dueling with each other, being as cautious as they could, and an untrained Padawan going up against a Sith Lord. You basically don't really have the best experience with seeing the Jedi, what they are capable of. But in the prequel trilogy, you see fully trained Jedi Knights ready to go in what they are doing. They know what they're doing, they're fully trained, they're using the Force to predict their opponent's moves. That's the kind of shit you would expect a Jedi to be capable of. So, that is how the spectacle of the original and the original trilogy inform the substance of the universe. It's how the world building goes. It lets you know how the universe functions, how this movie franchise is supposed to work, what it does, what everything means, the technology. You get a sense for how things are supposed to function. And now, after half an hour, I can finally start talking about the fucking Force Awakens. How does the Force Awakens use spectacle to inform the substance? It doesn't. It literally does not use spectacle to inform the substance of this universe at all. Because the substance of this universe is nothing has changed. Literally, nothing has changed. It's literally just the Empire and the Rebels fighting once again. The spectacle in this movie is just that. It's spectacle. And that means it's hollow. It looks impressive, but it's pointless. It's effectively like... It'd be like if you're playing a AAA video game that has really good graphics, but it has gameplay for shit. It's like, it has shitty gameplay, and you get through it, and you don't feel any kind of accomplishment from actually succeeding in beating the game. And you suddenly realize, what was the point of doing that? You basically, left me with nothing. You have left me nothing to talk about with your game, other than the bad experience that it left me. So, yeah, that's kind of why substance is a lot more important. But like I said, I was willing to give the movie a chance. I was willing to give it the utmost benefit of the doubt. So I think I'm going to basically try and describe my experience while watching this movie. Okay, so I basically got my soda, I got my hot pretzel, I sat down in the theaters, and I was a bit perturbed at the fact that the Lucasfilm logo played, and it's dark and silent because it no longer has the fanfare of the 20th Century Fox theme to go along with it. It just felt like a foreshadowing of the dark times that were ahead of us. But as soon as I basically saw A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away pop up, I was basically thinking, holy crap, I'm seeing a Star Wars movie. And then Star Wars pops up, the title and everything, the credit scroll starts rolling, and it's kind of exactly what I predicted. The first line in it is, Luke Skywalker is missing. Okay, so this movie is going to be all about trying to find him. But then the credit scroll takes a rather dissatisfying turn with the naming of our villains, the First Order. And I'm thinking, well, the First Order? Why the hell are they called the First Order? That's kind of a dumb name. I mean, this is basically the Empire. I mean, they have all the same technology, they have all the same ships as the Empire. Why not just call themselves the Empire, the Galactic Empire again? They literally said that the First Order rose from the ashes of the Empire. They're clearly trying to rebuild the Empire. What's the point of having a different name? But that's just nitpicking at this point. I cannot remember for the life of me if Supreme Leader Snoke is mentioned in the credit scroll or not, because if he is, that's probably the best that we would ever actually get for build-up for Snoke, but I'll talk about Snoke in a few more minutes. Effectively speaking, you're going to have to bear with me because I'm drawing on all this from memory. I hate The Force Awakens so much that I literally have refused to watch it ever since it came out. That one viewing in theaters that I've had, that is one and that is done. Literally speaking, my brother-in-law got me The Force Awakens. He basically got me a copy of it so I could watch it home whenever I wanted. I've literally refused to try to watch it. I mean, I tried to put it on once, and I literally couldn't get past the credit scroll. It's like, oh my god, I freaking so angry with this movie. I can't bring myself to watch it again. So let's finally get into why, shall we? There was just this funny little anecdote I remember. The first time I saw BB-8 in the trailers, that little droid with an R2 unit, with an R2 unit's head sitting on top of what looked like a soccer ball. Literally in 2014, I think, was when I first saw this trailer, and it's like, well, somebody's a fan of the FIFA World Cup. Because that's what he looks like, doesn't he? I mean, basically, you take that little thing, you take off BB-8's head, it looks like you could punt him across the field, doesn't it? uh, so, we basically see a Star Destroyer coming in on this little desert planet, and it's apparently so large that it's apparently able to eclipse the entire planet, and I'm just left thinking, okay, homage or ripoff? Because I've been willing to defend JJ in the past between the whole homage versus ripoff thing, which I will explain at the end of, like, the plot synopsis. But I was being extra cautious about about this movie. Then we see the stormtroopers and they're in the drop ships and whatnot, and you can tell it was directed by J.J. Abrams because the guy apparently does not know how proper lighting works. Okay, so then we land on the planet. We see, surprise of all people, Max von Sydow is in this movie. And that just goes to show Disney's attitude with these movies, because it's like, yeah, Max von Sydow is only in this movie to cameo because he's a big-name celebrity, and it's a Star Wars movie, and Disney wants to make sure that this movie has as much, I don't know, pulling power as possible. And it's basically like putting, like, a fancy fern or a tree in your front lawn. You're trying to increase the resale value of the movie, and it's basically like, well, it's misguided, because, like, I always basically feel like the Star Wars movies they can have some big-name actors, but I feel like Star Wars should, at its heart, try to make the careers of new up-and-comers, instead of basically, like, trying to show off their celebrity pulling power. And this movie basically showcases that they wanted to show off their celebrity pulling power in the dumbest kind of way possible. So, you have Max von Sydow, and he's talking to Poe Dameron, played by Oscar Isaac, I think. I'm surprised to find out that Oscar Isaac is in his 40s. Like, whatever he's taking, he must be on some kind of really good health regimen. Or maybe he just comes from a family of men that don't really age as rapidly as other men. I know that my dad basically looked like he was in his 20s up until when he was in his 50s, so... So Max von Sydow has a little device that contains a map that will lead to Luke Skywalker, and says that only a Jedi can restore balance. We have to find Luke. He will basically, like, restore everything. And so it's like, yeah, okay, so Luke is gone, but he clearly left clues so that people could find him. This is good. I like this so far. Everything is good. Although I am wondering why the heck who the heck Max von Sydow's character is, and if you basically are wanting to play up on, like, this previous history that this guy has with Luke, Leia, and the Rebellion, even though Max von Sydow has never appeared in these movies at all, it basically, like, makes me wonder, why couldn't you have gotten what was his name? Why couldn't you have gotten Dennis Lawson to reprise his role as Wedge Antilles? Because Wedge basically, like, was in the Rebellion. He was one of the Rebellion's best pilots. He was the guy that destroyed Death Star 2 with the help of Lando Calrissian. You would think that basically, like, throwing in Wedge there as the one who had the map, since Luke knew him, Luke trusted him, it would make a whole lot more sense, and it would basically be another thing that, for the fans, you know? That would basically have bought a whole lot of goodwill from the fans, in my opinion, because it's like, hey, it's Wedge. So anyway, the First Order stormtroopers start landing, and Poe tries to get away, and his ship gets taken out by one of their blaster bolts, and he decides that he's going to give the map to BB-8 and send BB-8 off into the desert to hopefully find someone who can get the map to the Resistance. And I'm just left thinking, droid with sensitive information being left alone on a desert planet to hopefully try and find help. Homage or ripoff? Okay, so they're clearly referencing the original trilogy, but I'm pretty sure this is about as far as it will go. They've made their point. They're referencing the original trilogy as kind of like a little wink and nod to the fans. I'm sure the movie will have something new to bring to this. Then basically we see Kylo Ren. He steps out of the landing ship, the dark cloak, the mask, and everything. And I'm thinking that, okay, so far so good. Sure, he's basically a black-cloaked figure in weird-looking in black armor leading a legion of stormtroopers. But clearly he's got to have something to him, you know? I mean, a lot of people expected he was somehow going to be Darth Revan, even though Darth Revan was like, I don't know, lived how many years before the original trilogy? Like a few centuries or whatnot? So... But who knows? With the Force, many things are possible. Maybe he's somehow been reincarnated or whatever. I honestly would have thought so much more of Kylo Ren if he didn't start talking, because I gotta admit, the voice that they gave him really does not intimidate. It just sounds... It sounds like this. I'm just gonna put this out there, people. I have worked in a drive-thru before, and he literally sounds like a completely disinterested drive-thru employee trying to take the customer's order. And I should know because I once was that employee. Seriously, there's literally nothing intimidating about this guy whatsoever. And I'm just left thinking, okay, maybe they can make something out of this guy. Especially if he's going to be our big bad, then they're going to have to do something about that voice. Hopefully he gets more intimidating as the movie goes on, because it's really the actions that count. And I gotta admit, he did impress me with one thing, literally using the Force to stop a laser bolt, and it's like, why is it this is the first time we've seen that in this series? You would think that basically, like, they would have done this a long time before now, so why is it this is the first time we've ever seen them do it? It was cool, but, then basically, he's killed Max von Sydow, even though Max von Sydow is the only person who has most likely seen the map at this point, and he captures Poe Dameron because Poe was too stupid to try and escape. Instead, he basically wanted to fight against overwhelming odds to basically help a whole lot of people that honestly couldn't be saved at this point, instead of trying to escape with BB-8, or maybe going in a different direction that BB-8 would go and to try and draw them off. So Poe's basically been captured by Kylo Ren, and here's basically where you start to see the seams in the seams in the writing for the movie, because this basically goes to show me that they just were not prepared for what this movie was supposed to be. Because, basically speaking, you kind of expect a certain quality to the writing in Star Wars, and effectively the first time that Poe Dameron, our Han Solo for this trilogy, is met face to face with the big bad guy of this trilogy, Kylo Ren, he starts quipping. He starts quipping in a very 2015 kind of way. So it's like, so who talk first? You talk first? I talk first? I'm sorry, but that just doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. You would think that basically, like, sure, it could establish that Poe is a jokester, even though stuff like this really is just kind of cringy, but it's done in such a way that doesn't really fit in with this universe. Like, if you want Poe to be quippy, if you want him to basically kind of like be sarcastic, have him flat out insult Kylo. Like, basically showcase, I'm not afraid of you. You don't intimidate me. It's basically like it just didn't really work. It's one of those things that tries to get a cheap laugh from the audience, but I remember being in the theater and nobody laughed at that. So, fail. So. Then we see what is probably the most interesting character in the entire movie, a stormtrooper, who basically witnesses a fellow stormtrooper die, and suddenly he realizes that, holy crap, people can actually get killed in a Star War. So, he basically, like, has a bit of a panic attack, and by the end of the scene, he is just refusing to fire on innocent civilians, despite the fact that Kylo Ren ordered it. I think that basically maybe I should have taken a moment to talk about, like, how the fact that, crap, I literally just read her name, but I've completely forgotten about it. Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones is in this movie. She plays a new stormtrooper commander known as Captain Phasma, and she's got shiny new chrome armor, and apparently we were supposed to identify with her through her actions and her character. Unfortunately, she doesn't really have either of those things. As you see how she is used in this movie, she has no character, and she doesn't really have all that many actions to speak of. Effectively speaking, since it's no secret at this point that this movie is just a shameless rehash of A New Hope and other themes from the original trilogy, Brienne of Tarth is literally just a commentary on Boba Fett. She's shiny, she has a cool-looking design, but she's really only there to sell action figures. Nothing more. So anyway, they go back to Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer, and Finn is having a panic attack, and he basically decides that he's going to bust Poe out of prison, and that's all good. I do like that dynamic. I do like the fact that it's a stormtrooper that's turning against the First Order, but it does come off as kind of weird, because it's later informed that the stormtroopers in this movie are really conscripted into the First Order. They are kidnapped at a very young age and basically indoctrinated to be stormtroopers in the First Order. They literally grow up with the First Order, being brainwashed by them. So if this is Finn's first mission, how is it that basically, like, it just doesn't really feel genuine all that much, because if he's been brainwashed to do this from what could have been a very young age to the point where he doesn't even know his real name, then that just goes to show that, like, the idea that they would have a security breach like this is just not really feasible, because it shows that it would be possible that people could, like, rebel against their programming, but you would think that you would have a larger pool of, like, defective stormtroopers. So it's like, this is the first guy that's ever rebelled against them. It doesn't really feel real. And how is it that this guy can basically have been brainwashed by these people literally all his life, and this is the first time he's ever had a lapse of judgment with them? So he breaks Poe out of prison. Now wait, I'm jumping the gun. Technically, I'm skipping over a whole lot of things because I really don't want to necessarily, like, muddle up this review, but basically speaking, like, Kylo Ren interrogates Poe Dameron, and I gotta admit, a scene that shows off a Force power that's kind of creepy, because he's effectively using the Force to read Poe's mind, and it's apparently so invasive that it's actually rather torturous and whatnot, and that's how Kylo Ren learns that the map is with a BB-8 unit on the planet. Except I have a big question about that, because the Force could already be used to read people's minds. Don't you remember the original trilogy? It's like, basically speaking, Vader could use the Force to read people's thoughts based on their feelings all the time. That's one of the reasons why the Jedi practice the suppression of feelings and emotions, because they know their enemies can take advantage of that. During the final battle with Vader on Death Star 2, Luke is trying to hide from Vader because he doesn't want to fight, and Vader basically begins reading his thoughts, basically revealing that Luke has a long-lost twin sister. So basically because Luke was thinking about it, had such compassion for his sister, that's how Vader found out that that the sister existed. So it's like, yeah, you could use the Force to read people's minds. You don't need to torture them for it. They'll literally, like, tell you everything that you need to know just by thinking about it. So the idea that you have a Force technique to torture the information out of them, it just feels unnecessary. You know what I'm saying? It feels like this movie wants to show us something new without realizing how pointless this new thing really is. So afterwards, Finn breaks Poe out of prison and is like, I want to get away from the First Order. Can you fly a TIE fighter? Sure. And they basically go off. For some reason, the TIE fighter is tied down. I don't know if that's a safety anchor or a fuel line. Why didn't the two of these guys know about it to begin with? Why didn't they notice it? It feels like it only exists to create tension. And Finn, who was basically like nearly traumatized by the sight of his stormtrooper buddy dying in his arms, and he clearly doesn't want to kill people, has no problem with shooting the TIE fighters' blasters, blowing up God knows how many other conscripted stormtroopers who were brainwashed to do this just like he was. I mean, you basically want to try and justify why Poe is basically kind of innocent. You kind of don't realize that that means all the other stormtroopers are innocent as well. Like, literally speaking, you have Poe basically blowing up people who are just as innocent as he is. Nope, Finn, I'm sorry. They're so literally interchangeable at this point. So Poe wants to go back to Jakku because he knows that BB-8 has the map to Luke Skywalker. Finn just wants to get away from the First Order. They get shot down, they fall out of the atmosphere, they crash land on Jakku, and Poe is nowhere to be found. Finn is the only one who clearly escaped the crash, and the TIE fighter that they were in sinks, and for some reason, Poe's jacket has been left behind. The jacket that he was clearly wearing when they were trying to escape, so it's like, how did his jacket get off of him? And is that supposed to be an indication that he's dead? Well, okay, he's dead. So now Finn is alone in a desert, he's got Poe's jacket, and he's trying to, like, get out of here as quickly as he can. And now we start talking about the real star of this movie, Rey, played by Daisy fucking Ridley. I gave this character a chance, and I gotta admit, I kinda was won over by her when I first saw this movie, until I started thinking about it. Effectively speaking, I was curious about who Rey was going to be and how she fit into all of this. When I found out that she was basically just a teenager stranded on a desert planet, basically going about their day-to-day, dreaming for adventure and a life beyond whatever it is that they're doing, I basically thought, okay, they're making another reference. Nothing big, but can I please get something new at this point? So Rey basically, like, spends her time in the desert basically as a junker. She takes apart old wreckages of old ships, mostly Imperial stuff, and she brings them to this fat-looking monstrosity played by one of the idiots from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who basically, like, gives her food in exchange for, like, the stuff she brings him. And it's like, okay, she brought him all that stuff, she cleaned it, and she's only getting a quarter portion of food for that? This guy is clearly ripping her off, so... But I don't care about that, because, basically speaking, she comes across BB-8, who has clearly been captured by someone else living in the desert, a junker just like Rey, and I just don't get it. I don't get this scene at all, because she rescues BB-8 from this fellow junker and salvager, she shoos that junker away, and then she just basically, like, tells BB-8 that town is that way. You know, the town that's filled with other people who are probably going to capture BB-8 and try to sell him because he looks like a very valuable and very expensive piece of equipment, and they are literally slaving away for food in this desert. I don't even get it. Why does she even bother saving him if she's not going to try and salvage him herself? I mean, that could have been a character building moment for her. She thinks about selling him, but then basically, like, decides, nah, like, I basically want to keep him or something. They try to have that scene later on, but since they established that she has no interest in selling him even for food at this point, why should we believe it when the opportunity comes up for her later, which it does, because she takes him into town, she basically, like, offers her daily haul to Unkar Plutt. He's like, nah, this shit ain't worth all that much, but that droid you've got there, I think he's worth about 60 portions. Assuming that she can make a quarter portion last a day, that basically could cover her for, I'd say, basically almost 2 years worth of food right there. So it's like, yeah, that's a pretty good deal just for a droid that you happen to meet in the desert, but at this point, Rey basically has to show that she's completely incorruptible and basically turns down the food. And now, basically, that she knows that Unkar Plutt wants said droid, she should realistically get as far away from there as possible and go hide out someplace with a droid until the heat cools off, right? Wrong. Unkar Plutt immediately calls up the First Order, and she is still hanging around. Conveniently, that's the point where Finn shows up. Yeah, you crash land on a desert planet that's totally not Tatooine, totally a completely original new planet that Disney can market and thus claim credit for without having to pay Lucas a royalty. You could have crash landed anywhere on that planet, and yet you crash landed close enough to the events of the movie to where you can remain relevant. All you need to do is walk across the desert for about half a day, you find that settlement, and then you start drinking from a water trough with this weird, gigantic alien pig monster. Okay, hope you enjoy salmonella or epirithrozon infection. Whatever. Who knows? Maybe they've wiped out disease in the Star Wars universe. Clone Wars might have something to say about that. Anyway, Unkar Plutt sends 2 guys after Rey, and of course, Rey kicks their asses. Now, a lot of people have made the argument that, well, Rey has grown up as a junker slave, she's got nobody around to protect her, of course she would learn some level of self-defense so that she basically wouldn't be, so that situations like this, when they come along, she'd be prepared for them. Yeah, I could buy that, if not for 2 reasons. One, Rey is basically living on quarter portions of food and water a day. She should basically be bordering on malnourished at this point. She's literally starving. And I don't think that basically being starving and basically like eating a quarter portion of bread every single day just to sustain yourself is the kind of diet that encourages the growth of muscle mass. Plus, look at Rey. Look, basically based on her physical physique, I'm pretty sure that a guy could subdue her just by basically just dragging her to the ground and sitting on her. So, yeah. I kind of can't necessarily believe that she is in any sort of position to physically fend off any kind of opponent, let alone 2, but if she's practicing with that bow staff of hers, I can get behind that. I can believe that, because she carries that thing around for a reason to defend herself with. I'm just saying that, like, she shouldn't be as healthy as she is. So, she fends off her 2 attackers. BB-8 points out the fact that Finn is wearing Poe's jacket, so of course that means he stole it. She goes up to him, she knocks Finn out, and he's like, hey, what the fuck? She's like, you stole that jacket. It's like, no, I didn't steal this jacket. It belongs to a friend of mine, Poe Dameron. We're friends. I tried to help him escape, but he's gone. And so that's like, okay, so you must be with the Resistance, and Finn, who just wants to get away from the First Order because, well, let's face it, Finn's a coward. He decides, yeah, I'm totally with the Resistance. Yep, I'm with the Resistance. It's clearly because he's attracted to Rey, and he's like, yeah, people have made jokes about him being thirsty, but it's just, like, pathetic. I really friggin' hate this scene, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm totally with those cool Resistance people. Yeah, I'm totally with them. Want to go out? Here's the next scene that probably irritates me the most, and it's something that I didn't pick up on when I first saw the movie, because it it passed over my head, but now that I've realized that it's a thing, it's something that I just cannot fucking forget, because this is the point in the movie where the politics that went into the making of this movie start to come full center, because, literally speaking, when Finn notices that there are two First Order stormtroopers that suddenly spot them and start chasing them with rifles, he grabs Rey's hand and starts run. And he's like, "We gotta run, move." So they're running, and Finn is basically holding on to Rey, make sure they don't get separated. And she's all like, "Let go of me! We gotta run, we gotta move. I know how to run without you holding my hand." And it's like, okay, so you want to make a big deal out of this? The fact that this guy doesn't want to get separated from you because, well, I don't know, you guys are the closest thing he has to friends down here, and basically, like, you guys think that he's with the Resistance. You guys don't want to he doesn't want you to get separated, and you're making a big deal about the fact that he's holding on to you. Sure, I get that you can run without holding your hand, but why do you have to make it such a big deal? Especially since this is literally designed to be a no-win situation. Imagine what the dialogue would be if basically, like, Finn didn't hang on to Rey and basically, like, started to outrun her. Or what if, like, they got blasted and Finn tried to basically, like, and basically got up without helping her up. Because it's basically like, suddenly it moves from she can run without someone holding her hand to suddenly, what a prick this guy is. Hasn't he ever heard of chivalry? It's a lose-lose situation. It's like, you're either damned if you do, or damned if you don't. It's like, yeah, this guy could basically, like, help. This guy could basically help you, but you don't need his help. But when he doesn't help you, you're just gonna claim that, he's clearly a sexist anyway. So it's like, that's what I friggin' hate about this whole nonsense, because it's literally a lose-lose situation, because that's how they've rigged the game. So why even bother playing? You might as well play thermonuclear war. At least in that game, when nobody wins, half the world gets blown up. That's a reference to war games, by the way. Don't go around thinking that I'm actually some kind of nuclear fanatic. Okay, so So basically, they're trying to get away from the First Order. They're trying to get away from the TIE fighters that are shooting at them. They basically decide that they gotta get off planet. They need a pilot, and Rey just so happens to be a pilot. Yeah, because she has been a junker slave, living in a desert, pulling apart ships. That totally explains why she is able to fly a ship. You know, all this could easily be forgivable. All of this could literally go away with one line of dialogue. One line of dialogue that implies that Unkar Plutt taught her how to pilot a ship. Unfortunately, the movie has gone out of its way to establish that she and Unkar don't have that kind of relationship. She is effectively his slave. She comes to him begging for food, and she hands him scraps. Now, maybe the line of dialogue could be that he needed to have, like, certain things moved, so he needed someone to be a chauffeur for him. Yeah, write it like that. Write it to where he used her for a chauffeur for a while, so he had to teach her how to fly. That's all you need. You only need lines of dialogue like that. We'll get to that issue later on when we get to the Rise of Skywalker, or maybe the Last Jedi, but keep that in mind. That's a huge thing that I want to talk about. So, unbelievable. This review is almost an hour long, and I'm not even through the first act of this damn movie! I need to stop surmising and just basically get to it. It's no secret at this point that Rey is basically a Mary Sue. Now, literally speaking, every single excuse that pretty much people have ever had for trying to defend why Rey is not a Mary Sue, you can just basically ignore them. They are literally 100% all bullshit. They friggin', Worst of all, when they try to defend that she isn't a Mary Sue, they literally confirm that she is a Mary Sue. Because there is literally no excuse for why Rey should be good at everything. Luke was not good at everything. Effectively speaking, Luke was a good pilot, yes, but that was because he basically grew up in an environment where you could be a pilot. He had a family, he had an aunt and uncle, and he had friends. Literally speaking, you want to learn a thing or two about Luke's life on Tatooine? Listen to the Star Wars radio drama. The radio drama that was released for the original trilogy back in the 80s or whatnot. It does a lot to flesh out Luke's life on Tatooine before he found R2, before he bought R2 and 3PO, and it's good stuff. It's good stuff to show how Luke became a good pilot, and it's like, that's cool. That is good informant stuff. Like, Luke basically, like, practices in his, like, what's it called? His T-16, those basically kind of like speeders, whatnot, except they hover, they kind of, like, fly within the atmosphere. Luke never really piloted an actual starfighter before, but he was still good enough at flying within an atmosphere, so he still had piloting experience. Rey, I can't believe she has any experience because she doesn't have a family, she doesn't have any friends, she doesn't have anyone who'd be willing to teach her how to pilot something, and we're just expected to believe that she's a good pilot because she tears apart old junker ships for salvage? Yeah, because it's yeah, because tearing pages out of a book teaches you how to read, right? So fucking stupid. And of course, she pilots the Millennium Falcon. You know, we didn't need that line of her being a pilot. If she basically improvised saying, okay, how hard could it be? This thing turns it on, and this is how you navigate. I can do this, I can do this. Have some doubt, you know? I mean, sure, she says, I can do this in the movie, but since she's already established that she is a pilot, why is she being nervous at all? Why are we even... It's completely pointless, and it's like... So, she takes the controls, Finn takes the gunner seat. She starts doing, like, really impressive maneuvering, especially when Finn gets the gun locked in a position. She pulls off a move that's just it's impressive, but quite frankly, I think it should have gotten them killed. And it's like, yeah, she basically is an expert at this, even though this is, like, her first time flying, so, it just basically is, like, too much to be believed. It's asking too much of the audience. The suspension of disbelief is, like, really friggin' out there. And at this point, fans of the original trilogy aren't even noticing it because we're too busy wondering why the heck that ugly fuck Unkar Plutt had the Millennium Falcon. What the hell is he doing with the Millennium Falcon? Where the hell is Han? Where the hell is Chewie? I think the worst part about it is that basically every single thing in this movie goes to show that, like, the men in the movie are not all that good. The men in the movie are literally there to be disgraced so that Rey can look better by comparison. And literally speaking, they have such a not-so-subtle moment where when Finn and Rey get captured in Han Solo's, like, big smuggler ship, literally speaking, Finn... like, leans forward to look through the windshield of the Millennium Falcon. Why the heck does a starship have a windshield to begin with? And in order to basically further himself, he props himself up by pushing Rey downward, and it's like, real subtle there, movie. Yeah, because stuff like that totally still happens in society if you're basically not paying attention to how the world really is. So... basically speaking, it's just like, it's stuff that you probably wouldn't notice immediately, but when you start looking for it, it's like, wow, fuck you, movie, fuck you. I think that basically, like, at this point in the movie, I just completely started losing any sort of respect for Kylo Ren as a villain at this point, because after he finds out that the droid got away from Jakku on a ship suddenly he takes out his lightsaber and starts hacking up the control panel, and it's like, this is the Dark Lord of the Sith that is supposed to be the main villain of this new trilogy. He is literally throwing a temper tantrum with his lightsaber. Oh my fucking god. So, so our characters meet up with Han Solo, and apparently Unkar stole the Millennium Falcon from somebody else who stole it from Han. I don't know. It's just the idea that Han Solo just happened to be immediately in the neighborhood of Jakku, where his precious Millennium Falcon was, and basically it's like he just so happened to come across the Falcon right as it was leaving the planet. It's like, that just seems, that's pushing my suspension of disbelief too far. This movie expects us to buy unbelievable crap. Why is it that it can't just give us a realistic scenario for once? So anyways, this subplot happens with a whole bunch of unnecessary stuff that explains that apparently Han Solo has gone back to smuggling. Yeah, because basically when you get out of a criminal lifestyle and you go and join the rebellion, where you become a general, a leader of men, and basically you get married to a princess, I might add, that suddenly just means that you're just, like, pretending to be a good guy, and eventually you'll go back to a life of crime because men are all just worthless cowards and thieves anyway. So, that's perfectly what you wanted for Han Solo when you knew he was going to get together with Princess Leia. The idea that eventually they'd get divorced and he'd go back to smuggling, right? So apparently he's so bad at smuggling, he basically runs afoul of these two different criminal syndicates, and he owes both of them money. And it's like, yeah, the reason that he owed Jabba the Hutt money is because he had to dump his shipment when an Imperial Star Destroyer boarded his ship for inspection. And he didn't want to take the risk, so he jettisoned the spice. So now you're basically making the claim that him just being bad at smuggling and owing people money is just the thing with Han Solo's character now, right? Fuck you, movie. Unbelievable. I sound like the critical drinker saying fuck off film. So a completely pointless action scene later with a whole bunch of tentacle monsters that look like something out of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films. And it's basically like, these monsters are ripping, like, the other gang members apart, like, as soon as they grab them, but nah, it decides it's gonna grab Finn and it's gonna drag him along the ship, and it's like, oh, this is just an excuse so that Rey can save him. So, they finally get on the Millennium Falcon, they try to get out of there, and surprisingly, Rey knows more about flying the Millennium Falcon than Han Solo does. I mean, they try to explain it away by explaining that Unkar Plutt installed some kind of fuel pump, a fuel compressor, in order to prevent people from stealing the Falcon from getting away too easily, but it's like, the fact that she has to basically, like, tell Han Solo what to do on his own fucking ship, that really just fucking pisses me off. It's like, this is the Millennium Falcon. This is Han Solo's ship. She is a junker slave. This is the first time she has ever flown a starship before. Stop telling him how to pilot his own goddamn ship. And here I thought that Rey wasn't going to be an annoying character. I had such high hopes that she would actually have anything redeemable about her whatsoever. But at this point, I wasn't angry with the film. I was asking all different kinds of questions about the film. I was asking, like, when are we gonna finally start seeing when are we gonna basically start following the map to try and find loot, because that's what I paid for. So Han basically brings up the map and explains that, yeah, the stuff with Luke Skywalker and the Jedi, it's all true. So I guess that counts as character development from Han in the original trilogy, because back then he wasn't a believer, but it turns out it was all true, and now Han is a true believer and whatnot. They don't really explain, like, why Luke disappeared, though. Ever since he disappeared, people have been looking for him. He said he was going into the unknown regions to find the last Jedi Temple, and he clearly left clues to try and find him, but it's basically like, I get that Luke probably disappeared for a good reason, but why is it that he's not here when the First Order is tearing apart the galaxy? So, basically speaking, like, Han decides they're going to take the map to Luke Skywalker to someone that he knows, someone who might know more about the Jedi stuff and Luke than he does, and that's when they go to Takodana, where they meet Maz Kanata. And basically, she's just an orange-colored female Yoda, except more annoying. I forgave this character when I first saw her because she reminded me of my own grandmother, but sorry, Granny, not even you can save this poor excuse for a character. Here is where the movie takes its nosedive in quality, because, literally speaking, this was... Up until now, the movie had been making homages to A New Hope, but it still felt distinct enough to where I was willing to forgive it. This was the point where I literally predicted exactly how the movie was going to go, because they land on Takodana, Han Solo has that heart-to-heart moment with Rey outside the ship, where he offers her a job on the Millennium Falcon. It's like, you did pretty good back there. I could use someone like you working for me. She's like, you're offering me a job? And she turns it down, of course, but it's like, hey, he's like the wise old mentor figure that's basically trying to take her under his wing. Kind of like, oh my god, he's going to die. I mean, I basically, like, knew that Han was most likely going to die because, like, Harrison Ford didn't want to do these movies, but it's at that point where you basically realize that this is basically following A New Hope almost beat for beat, and it just started to feel lazy to me. And it's like, no, I don't want to predict how he's going to die. I want to be surprised by it. But nope. I friggin' was able to predict the entire movie from that point on as badly as I could, because I told you that I went into the theater trying to give The Force Awakens a chance. This was the point where that chance literally ran dry, because it was at this point where I legitimately started hating this movie and literally stopped caring about where the movie was going. It was at this very scene, because now we catch up with the First Order and we get the first shot of both Starkiller Base and Supreme Leader Snoke. When I saw Starkiller Base for the first time, I was like, okay, they built some kind of belt into this planet, but maybe it's just a cool-looking base, and nothing to be worried about right now. Then I saw Supreme Leader Snoke, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Why the fuck is this guy? He's basically just a discount Palpatine. He's even giving a holographic projection of himself that makes himself look gigantic compared to his underlings. Disney, JJ, are you guys really that shameless? You guys literally bring in a discount Palpatine when you've already got a discount Vader? And this is the first time we're seeing him in this movie? I can't remember if he was mentioned in the credit scroll or not. And I'm just left thinking, oh my god, they cannot be this shameless. They can't be this desperate. But they were. But, as bad as all that was, I was at the very least curious about who or what Snoke was, because He's claiming that he saw the rise and fall of the Old Republic and the rise and fall of the Empire, so maybe he isn't Palpatine. Maybe he's something else. Maybe he's something from the dark... Maybe he's something from the unknown region, someone that we haven't seen before, someone that's completely unrelated to anything that's come before, which would be a problem because, like I said, that would make this new trilogy would make the entire saga feel lopsided, but at least it would be something new, something fresh, instead of just being Palpatine again. Hi. But, as bad as all that was, it was nothing compared to Starkiller Base. I gotta admit, I kind of gave like a slight nod to the fact that they named it Starkiller Base, clearly based off of Luke Skywalker's original name, Luke Starkiller or whatever it was. Was it Duke or Dak Starkiller? I don't know. But anyways, it was a nice little reference, but unfortunately that's the best I can say about Starkiller Base, because this is literally the moment where I stopped caring about the movie. Friggin' General Hux, played by Bill Weasley of all people, he gives this really over-the-top speech, and it's clear that they're using Nazi imagery to the point where the stormtroopers do a similar enough Nazi salute. I'm just gonna put it out there. Unless you are actually making a movie that takes place during World War II, never, under any circumstances, use Nazi imagery in your movie. And I'm not talking like this because it's offensive. No, I'm talking like this because it's lazy. It's lazy because literally speaking, everyone in their right mind is against Nazis and Nazism. Literally speaking, it's lazy because you're creating antagonists that you want the public, you want the audience to hate. So therefore, you make them with literally the most hateable group in all of history. You shouldn't do that. You should actually make a group, an antagonist that actually is effective at what they do. You don't need to just use Nazi imagery. Am I saying that movies out there don't use Nazi imagery? They use somewhat. Lucas basically did take some inspirations from the Nazis in World War II when writing the original trilogy, but the thing about it is, he was subtle about it. You having the First Order flag be a black and white symbol in the middle of a completely red flag, and then basically feature Hux shouting in a very Hitler-like way, and then having them do a friggin' salute like that, it's too far. It's too much. Dial it back. You're getting to cartoonish levels here. We aren't buying it. And that's the thing. It's the fact that basically it's so over the top and so cartoonish that you don't really buy it anymore. It's just basically, it feels like they are trying too hard to be lazy. You want to try hard? Try writing the film fucking better. But I've said my piece about the Nazis and whatnot. Let's talk about what killed this movie, in my mind. Effectively speaking, Starkiller Base. This was the point where the movie literally lost me, and I just threw up my hands and said, "It's a new hope. It's a new hope all fucking over again." I should have left the theater, but I paid money for it. And I could have gotten a refund, but I still was curious enough to see where the movie was going, but by then I had almost completely stopped caring, because it's like, I know that Han's gonna die, I know that basically, like, they are literally, like, hammering home the references to A New Hope so much that this movie doesn't even have its own identity anymore. At this point, it's basically a teen a loner teen from a desert planet stumbles across a droid with valuable information, has to leave said planet on the Millennium Falcon, meeting Han Solo and a wise old mentor figure, eventually discovering a massive planet-destroying superweapon, and having that wise old mentor figure get killed by a person in a dark cloaked costume who may or may not be who has some long history with them. And that's basically all you really need to say about this movie. It's A New Hope again. But it's A New Hope done badly. And I mean so badly. It shows that the people making this movie didn't understand Star Wars from the get-go. They don't understand how the structure of the original trilogy. They just wanted to make A New Hope, but make it flashier. Make it bigger. Yeah, the moment that I saw the hologram projection of Starkiller Base set up against the Death Star, I literally said to myself, pull up your goddamn pants, JJ. Because seriously, that's the only thing I can see Starkiller Base as being. It's literally JJ telling George, mine's bigger than yours. And by mine, I mean my dick. Or who knows? I think that it's fairly more evident that JJ's compensating for something. Oh! That was probably the cringiest thing that I've ever done on this channel. But here is why Starkiller Base does not work for me as a concept, and certainly doesn't work for me in this movie. Because, you remember what I said about spectacle informing the substance? This movie really doesn't have any substance, and Starkiller Base effectively robbed it from having any friggin' substance, because you remember how I mentioned the credit scroll of the original movie? The original credit scroll of the original Star Wars mentions the Death Star as the planet-destroying superweapon that the Empire now has in their possession. Literally speaking, the original Star Wars movie might be about Luke, might be Luke's story, as he basically, because Luke is the main character and whatnot. But the simple fact is, everything about the first movie is all about the Death Star. It's about getting the plans for the Death Star, keeping the plans away from the Empire, trying to find a weakness in the Death Star, trying to get back to the rebels so that they can plan an attack on the Death Star, and finally destroying the Death Star. It's also about trying to escape from the Death Star. Literally every single thing about this movie revolves around the Death Star. The Force Awakens, however, Starkiller Base didn't even exist until 5 minutes before it's on screen. No, not 5 minutes, 5 seconds before it's on screen. It's mentioned by name, and in the next scene, we see it. The same with Snoke. Literally speaking, mentioned, then suddenly on screen, so matter-of-factly. And suddenly, the rest of the movie is about trying to destroy it. This movie was supposed to be about following the map to find Luke Skywalker. And yet, suddenly, it's just A New Hope all over again. Because suddenly, this huge planet-destroying superweapon takes up the focus of the plot. Because now, we gotta friggin' rally our forces to destroy this thing. No build-up, no establishment, this thing just exists. And suddenly, it's on screen. God, my neck hurts. You would think that basically, the fact that this thing is so powerful that it can destroy 5 planets at once would be cool. It would be mind-boggling that I would actually garner some respect for it. Except I don't, because, once again, it's all style, no substance. Because basically speaking, the first time we saw the Death Star in A New Hope, when it destroys Alderaan, that's the point where we realize that the Empire isn't just basically like exaggerating the claim. This thing can destroy entire planets. It just wiped out an entire planet, an entire civilization, an entire culture, literally just like that. That's boom. But this thing, however, it basically can wipe out 5 planets at once. It's like, okay, yeah, we know that planet-destroying technology is possible in this universe, but it kind of would have felt a bit more, or it kind of would have had more of an impact had we known that this thing existed, had it featured into the plot at all before this point. Because now that it's here so matter-of-factly, the audience hasn't had time to actually get a feel of it, to actually worry about it, and then verify that it has this incredible power that it does. It just shows up and boom, it wipes out 5 planets, and it's like, okay, that happened, and apparently, and here's where the movie really fucked up, apparently with that one blast wiping out 5 planets, Starkiller Base wiped out the entirety of the New Republic. And I'm just left thinking that, what? What the fuck? You see, this is basically what I mean when Star Wars needs to use spectacle to inform the substance, and why this movie failed to do that. We got a sense of how the galaxy worked in the original trilogy thanks to the spectacle informing the substance. We got a sense of how the galaxy worked in the prequel trilogy for the same thing. But this movie? We don't fucking know how the galaxy works. Effectively, the only things that have actually changed are the names. We never see the New Republic. We never see the new galaxy that our heroes from the original trilogy fought for. They fought to create. We never got to see the galaxy at peace. We never got to see what the fruits of our characters' labor really was. And just like that, it's all gone. Say what you want about Alderaan. Like, the reason that Alderaan worked was because it was Princess Leia's home planet. And it was basically just a means of demonstrating that the Death Star could in fact destroy a planet. But because we know that the technology to destroy a planet is possible, the fact that we are seeing 5 planets that we don't even know, they're never named on screen, just get blown up with nobody that we know on those planets, and we're told that these planets represent the entirety of the New Republic, it's just like, really? Meh? It just feels so incredibly fucking pointless to me, because it doesn't really feel like any of this is earned. It feels like they wanted an emotional moment, but they completely failed at doing it. Now we're going to talk about why Starkiller Base doesn't work as a concept, because, literally speaking, it's been 30 years since the end of the Return of the Jedi. It's been 30 years since Death Star 2 was destroyed. Starkiller Base is the size of a planet. Like, literally speaking, you look at, like, the relative scale of Starkiller Base, it is so much more massive than the Death Star. The Death Star needed about 20 years to be built, and I honestly, don't necessarily believe that Death Star 2 was built in just 4 years. I think the construction of Death Star 2 had to have begun while Death Star 1 was still under construction. You might basically, believe that it's possible, or even feasible, that they would make more than one Death Star. But there's no way I can possibly believe that Starkiller Base was built in just 30 years. I refuse to believe that you could completely hollow out a planet and build a massive planet-destroying superweapon that harnesses the power of stars in just 3 decades. No way. That's not possible. And the worst part about it is, Disney Lucasfilm seems to agree with me, because they've basically retconned the shit out of Starkiller Base. They basically have tried to make the claim that in fucking the new PS4 game, what's it called, Jedi Fallen Order, that Starkiller Base was built a few years into the Empire's rule. And it's like, and worst of all, it's been made out of the planet of Ilum, a planet housing the Jedi Temple where most Jedi get most of the kyber crystals from the galaxy. Now, it would make sense. Kyber crystals are a great source of energy that the Empire would, of course, try to exploit. But the fact that you have to basically destroy Ilum in order to make Starkiller Base, well, one, I just don't fucking believe that. And I'll have my reasons why, but I'll explain later. The fact that you basically have Starkiller Base being under construction during the first few years of the Empire, it makes me wonder, why the heck would they even bother continuing with the Death Star project when you could literally make something bigger and more powerful that could wipe out multiple planets at once? Why not pour most of your resources into that? It just doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Okay, so another thing that doesn't work as a concept is the Death Star, being relatively moon-sized, could feasibly be moved. You could basically have engines with the Death Star to allow it to travel the galaxy to where it wouldn't be trapped in one place. But moving a moon is one thing. Moving a planet? That's something different. Effectively speaking, Starkiller Base was apparently made in a solar system that had 2 suns, which means that at most it's going to destroy 10 planets. So several decades worth of construction and a whole trillions of credits in order to build this thing. That's the most mileage you're ever going to get out of it, because there's no way you can move Starkiller Base. You have any kind of engine, any kind of propulsion for this planet whatsoever, you're going to throw off the planet's gravity, and you're going to kill literally everybody on it. So effectively speaking, once it wipes out the closest sun, that's it. Kaput. It can't be used ever again. And that's one of the reasons why I can't believe that it actually is the planet Ilum, because Ilum is mostly covered in ice, and yet somehow, it's mostly covered in ice with very little native foliage or fauna, and yet, basically speaking, this Starkiller Base comes from a system that has 2 fucking planets. Wait, no, 2 fucking stars that are basically within the Goldilocks zone. There's no way an ice planet could exist within the Goldilocks zone and have that kind of spruce vegetation. Effectively speaking, I honestly believed that Starkiller Base was once a normal-looking planet that wasn't covered in ice, but the moment that they absorbed the first sun, it started to freeze. And it only kept getting worse and worse when they took out the second planet. There's no way that Starkiller Base was ever meant to be Ilum. I refuse to believe that it's Ilum. Stop trying to convince me that it's Ilum, because it's not Ilum. Okay. So it's apparent at that point, I just basically stopped caring. Here's something else that I would garner as confusing at the time. Effectively, before the whole Starkiller Base situation, Finn separates from Han and Rey because he's an ex-stormtrooper that just wants to get away from the First Order. So he goes off, and Rey somehow attunes to the Force to hear something down in the basement where she finds Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. And no, I'm not calling it Luke's lightsaber. It's Anakin's lightsaber. So she touches it, and she has a vision. And apparently it's a vision of Luke having his duel with Vader on Bespin, and then basically we see what happened with Luke's Jedi Order. We basically see Luke with R2. We see the Knights of Ren, finally, after they were mentioned like 5 minutes ago as being a thing, only to have Kylo Ren stab one in the heart with his lightsaber, and basically it's like, it's a trippy sequence. It's like, okay, there's clearly some kind of story that they want to tell. They're just doing it poorly. Now, the thing about that whole scene is that it's not impossible. Effectively speaking, Yoda basically described that through the Force, you will see other things, the past, and even the future. So, basically speaking, what we basically have in that scene is Rey seeing visions of the past. visions of the past of Luke and of basically like of Kylo Ren's fall to the dark side. The problem that I have with it is that we actually see the vision. We could have actually gotten the point across that this is what was happening if we just saw Rey basically reacting to it and we hear voices of the past, like, basically because every single time someone has used the Force to see, like, I don't know, the future or have a vision of something that came before, it was always basically, like, internal. You would basically hear the voices in their heads, like when Yoda basically feels Anakin's pain when Anakin kills the Tusken Raiders, and we hear Qui-Gon saying, "No!" and, like, all that stuff. Or like when Luke has his vision of Leia and Han being tortured on Bespin. So it's like, it's too flashy. It's spectacle. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And the fact that it was brought on by the lightsaber, it's like, okay, so maybe there's an argument to be made that because the lightsaber was connected to these events, at least the first event, not the second event, that it might basically show Rey this information, but the fact that it's triggered by the lightsaber just basically goes to show that Disney doesn't understand how lightsabers work. Yes, the Force is magical in nature, but the lightsaber is really just a tool, a Jedi's weapon. It takes the skill in the Force to wield one, yes, but the lightsaber was never meant to have much magical significance. And so now you're trying to base the entire trilogy around this lightsaber, when quite frankly, the prequel trilogy has established that even though Jedi are supposed to build their own lightsaber to their own specifications, Anakin was either losing or destroying his lightsaber all the time and had to get spares. There was no trouble in using a spare lightsaber. So, of course, Rey has to deny the hero's journey. She decides that she's never touching that lightsaber again. Oh, please. Please do. Please stick to that. And she tries to literally run away from the movie, where she ends up getting captured by Kylo Ren after learning that she's somehow a sharpshooter. She literally turns off the safety on the gun that Han Solo gave her, and she is immediately able to shoot 2 stormtroopers dead, 1 shot each. Fucking. Luke wasn't the best shot. That's what he had Han for. Luke wasn't the best pilot either. That's what they also had Han for. Luke definitely couldn't use the Force. That's what Obi-Wan was for. Effectively speaking, Luke got his ass kicked a lot in the original movie. He failed a lot because he had much to learn. The only thing that Luke actually does right in the original movie is destroying the Death Star. And that was enough. That was fucking enough. You would think that Rey would have some kind of flaw, because getting captured doesn't fucking count. I'm running myself hoarse here. So, you remember how I mentioned that Starkiller Base was not a thing in this movie? How we didn't know that it existed, and how suddenly it's now taken over the entirety of the plot? Well, as it turns out, I mean, there's a huge fucking plot hole when it comes to this movie. Because, so, now that Rey has been captured and Maz Kanata's temple, cantina, bar thing has been destroyed, the Resistance show up, and they manage to fight off the First Order, and surprise, surprise, Poe Dameron is alive. How the fuck? And of course, Han Solo reunites with Princess Leia in a scene that's made even more awkward by the presence of C-3PO, who apparently hasn't learned anything about human nuances and can't keep his mouth shut, because... and for some reason, 3PO looks plastic in this scene. Like, in the direct sunlight, 3PO looks plastic. His suit doesn't look like it's made out of metal at all, and it doesn't look shiny. And I'm just left thinking, what the hell, Disney? How the heck did you screw up 3PO like this? And 3PO now has a red arm. And why do you think he has a red arm? Why, to sell new action figures, of course, because who in their right mind is going to buy their 10 millionth C-3PO action figure? You gotta have at least one thing about the action figure to make it distinct, am I right? So, they go with the Resistance to the Resistance base, and I'm just left thinking, why the hell are they called the Resistance? Like, literally speaking, they should be the Republic, shouldn't they? They should be the army of the Republic, shouldn't they? Like, the name Resistance implies that they are somehow the underdog in the situation, that they are somehow less funded and less resourced than the First Order, but that shouldn't be, considering that they're in a galaxy where the New Republic is in control. And it's even established in the opening credit scroll that the New Republic funds the Resistance. They should be the army of the New Republic. So why is it that they are called the fucking Resistance? So, basically Finn reunites with Poe, and we have a completely hand-waving line of dialogue implying that Poe survived. He ejected from the crash, he crash-landed, he was knocked out, and he woke up after nightfall in a desert, where after 30 fucking minutes of being out in the sun, Finn was almost dehydrated and on the verge of death. Yeah, I totally believe that Poe is gonna wake up after nightfall when it's nice and cool. Yeah, he's totally gonna survive until then. And somehow or another, he manages to get off of Jakku. If you wanted to have Poe live, why not have just let him live? Why not have just let him tag along with Finn? What would have been lost with Poe tagging along? We would have had another character, one that probably knew Han Solo a bit better. Someone who could have contacted the Resistance and helped get the map back to them sooner. Maybe someone who probably wouldn't have gone to that friggin' Taco Donna would have had them gone straight to the Resistance headquarters, so that way Rey wouldn't have gotten captured. I completely glossed over the fact that Finn tries to use the lightsaber in order to duel that TR-8R stormtrooper, the traitor guy, because that's how little relevance that has to the overall plot. It's all spectacle. It's flashy, but it doesn't matter. So, basically, the Resistance is having a meeting trying to figure out what to do about Starkiller Base, and somehow, they have a 3D mock-up of Starkiller Base when they literally didn't know that it existed until 5 minutes ago. And, speaking of not knowing that it existed, Finn basically announces that he knew that Starkiller Base was a thing, because he served on Starkiller Base when it was being built. And so I'm thinking, this guy, he's a turncoat stormtrooper who wants to get away from the First Order because he knows that the First Order killing people is bad. He knows that the First Order has a super weapon that is literally designed to cause 5 times the genocide of the Death Star, as in gonna kill a lot of people very quickly, which he of course doesn't like. And he is only choosing now to mention that it existed. You probably should have told someone before this point. Probably should have told anyone that Starkiller Base was a thing and that they were going to use it. I'm just basically going to put it out there. Finn just let 5 planets worth of people die because he failed to mention that Starkiller Base was a thing. They could have prepared for it. They could have hauled ass to the Resistance and told them to prepare for it. But they didn't. But he didn't. And they didn't. So, it's been 30 years Starkiller Base is so much larger than the Death Star. It's a planet-sized version of a planet-busting weapon. How do you think they're going to be able to take it out? There's no feasible way they'll be able to destroy this thing in this movie. It's going to have to be a thing until the end of the trilogy. It's going to be the threat that looms over the entire Resistance, right? Wrong. Turns out, this massive planet-destroying superweapon has literally the same weakness as the first Death Star. Fly through a trench, blow shit up. That's basically all it is. Unfortunately, they gotta lower the shields first before they can make an attack. And I'm just left thinking, how exactly do shields in the Star Wars galaxy actually work? Because, yeah, we had to disable the deflector shield in the energy shield in Return of the Jedi so that the fighters could make their attack. But anybody who remembers the original Star Wars movie remembers that the Death Star had a reflective shield as well, a magnetic field that the rebel fighters had to pass through before beginning their assault. But they clearly could pass through it. And then we see in the prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace, that a shield is just something that someone can easily walk through. Yeah, it deflects laser bolts and whatnot, but you could just walk through it. And worse, the Clone Wars TV series backs this up. So, how do shields really work? Do they really need to be disabled before you can actually attack it? Because I'm pretty sure that basically if you can come out of hyperspace in the planet's atmosphere and then immediately begin attacking, because that's literally what Han and Chewie and Finn do in the Millennium Falcon, because apparently the shield will stop anything going slower than hyperspeed. So during doing light speed, so they activate the hyperdrive, they go into hyperspace, they go through the shield and through the planet's atmosphere before stopping the hyperdrive, and I'm just left thinking, a split second later, they would have crashed into the planet, going at light speed. And I'm just left thinking that, wow, I'm glad that basically Disney avoided doing something that stupid. But I refuse to believe that going at the speed of light, they would have any time whatsoever to actually slow down the ship and not crash into it. I'm sorry, I just can't believe it. So, as it turns out, Finn was actually just a janitor on the Starkiller base, and I'm just left thinking, how the hell does the First Order's recruitment process even work? Does every single new recruit that they conscript into the First Order have to start out through janitor duty as well? Like, is janitor duty all a part of the brainwashing? How do you go from janitor to stormtrooper? That's what I want to know. Because if you're trained to do one thing, if you're being brainwashed by the First Order, you think you would be brainwashed to be a fighter, a stormtrooper. But how the heck are you going to take one of your brainwashed conscriptees and have them be a fucking janitor? You want a fucking janitor? Fucking hire a fucking janitor. But no, you gotta have one of your brainwashed conscriptees be the janitor, because a janitor will demand payment, and a janitor probably won't keep their mouth shut. But that's just the thing. How can you keep a planet that you've gutted, hollowed out, and turned into a planet-destroying superweapon secret? How did no one stumble across this by accident? How long has the First Order been a thing? How long? That's what I want to know. I demand to know. I want fucking answers. Yes, I skipped over the scene with Kylo Ren talking to Darth Vader's helmet, saying that he will finish what he started, but he needs guidance. He needs to be strong in the dark side of the Force, because that scene is literally pointless. A lot of people are saying that Kylo Ren is somehow a good version of Anakin Skywalker. He isn't. And I'm about to get to why. Anyone with a brain knows that this scene was meaningless, because anyone with a brain knows that that just because he's talking to Darth Vader's mask doesn't mean he's actually talking with Anakin. Doesn't mean he's talking with Vader. It doesn't mean he's talking with anything. You know why? Because Vader was redeemed. Anakin Skywalker was redeemed. He is a ghost, purified in the Force. So Kylo Ren is effectively talking to nothing. He is literally just, Effectively, he's getting the same out of talking to Vader's mask, the same that anybody does talking to a gravestone, or of their fallen relatives, or an urn containing their ashes. That's the most you're ever going to get out of that. You expect someone to friggin' talk back to you? Nope, never going to happen. He claims that he is conflicted, that he is pulled with the light between the light and the dark side, but you know what is better? You know what actually informs what's really going on inside Kylo Ren's head? Instead of being told that he's conflicted, actually showcasing that he is conflicted. Because so far, nothing in the movie has shown that he is in any ways conflicted about being torn between the light and the dark side of the Force. Literally speaking, the first scene that he's in, he cuts down an innocent old man and then orders that an entire village of innocents be executed. He literally uses the Force to torture people. There's literally nothing about this guy that is conflicted whatsoever. So finally, Rey has that meeting with Kylo Ren where he tries to force torture the information out of her. He even learns that she's from Jakku. She's waiting for her parents to come back for her, and yet she somehow sees Han Solo as a father figure. And even though I know that's what they were going for, it's like, yeah, she's known him for like a few hours at most. She really has some serious daddy issues. Keep that in mind, because that's going to become a theme when we get to the next part of this trilogy. Daddy issues. You might as well have called the whole entire Disney trilogy the Daddy Issues trilogy. So, here's what I find really funny. She's apparently strong enough with the Force that she can resist him and push him back, rebuff him, to the point where she is now reading his mind. And here's the line of dialogue that I find most funny. Kylo Ren is supposed to be our big bad guy for this trilogy. We've seen him use the Force to stop a laser bolt, the first time we've ever seen anything like that, so that's pretty impressive. And yet, in this scene, Rey tells him that he is afraid that he will never be as strong as Darth Vader. That's an indication right then and there that Kylo Ren is not as strong as Vader. So I'm just left thinking, okay, so we have a bad guy who's not as strong as our previous bad guy. Are we sure that he's supposed to be our bad guy? So keep that in mind. We've literally set the bar that Kylo is not as powerful as Vader. So keep that in mind when Rey starts showing off her powers. Not as strong as Vader, y'all. Here is basically why I say that Kylo Ren is not only not a good version of Anakin, he's literally not even a character. Kylo Ren is literally nothing more than a political straw man. And I realized that the moment I saw him take his mask off. The helmet and mask that are basically made to make him look like a discount Darth Vader reveals that Kylo Ren has nothing wrong with him. Yep, he's not wearing the mask because he's scarred or his face has been burned. Hell, the dark side of the Force isn't even corrupting his face, which is apparently something, because apparently Palpatine and all the bad Sith, the reason that they look like evil, twisted, creepy corpse guys is because the dark side of the Force is inherently corrosive. So, apparently Kylo is so in tune with the dark side of the Force, but he hasn't suffered any consequences for it yet. He doesn't even have Sith eyes. I mean, literally speaking, Anakin Skywalker, after killing a few separatists on Mustafar, had the Sith eyes going. But instead, what is Kylo Ren? Well, he's basically just Adam Driver. He literally looks like a discount Severus Snape. He is nothing more than a thin, pasty, slimy-skinned white kid with a big nose and big floppy ears. And the moment that I saw what he actually looked like, I knew what Disney was doing. I knew what they were saying. Kylo Ren is nothing more than a political message because he is literally a big, gigantic middle finger to the fan base of the Star Wars franchise. What do I mean? And why is it that no one picked up on this except me? Because, literally speaking, Kylo Ren is nothing more than a pasty, emo, teenage white kid who thinks that dressing up like Darth Vader and throwing temper tantrums with his lightsaber somehow makes him look cool. That is literally them insulting their primary demographic. And that is where the troubles began, because that goes to show that that's what they think of the fan base for these movies. They're nothing more than a bunch of pasty, nerdy white kids who think that dressing up as Darth Vader and having a lightsaber makes them look cool. Those are the people that pay hundreds of dollars. These are the whales that buy your merchandise, the action figures, the comics, who read the expanded universe novels, who buy the costumes, who dress up in full costumes and camp outside of a theater for up to 12 to 24 hours and wrap around the theater waiting to see these movies on opening night. Those are the people that you choose to insult with this character. That's effectively one of the reasons why I hated this movie so much, because I knew he was nothing more than a big middle finger to the people that made this franchise what it is. Because, let's face it, if those people hadn't bought the toys, the novelizations, and the comics, we never would have gotten Empire. We never would have gotten Empire. Everybody would have been surprised at the success of the first Star Wars movie, but nobody would have had enough faith that in the franchise to actually continue it with a sequel. Because that's not how it was back then. Getting a sequel was actually still a rare thing. And then Jaws happened. Still, sequels were not guaranteed. The Hollywood sequel machine didn't exactly begin until roughly around the late 80s, and then it definitely didn't take the stranglehold that it has on movies nowadays until the late 2000s. Now, any movie whatsoever, it's almost guaranteed to get a sequel. It could be literally the most atrocious movie that's ever been made, it's going to get a sequel. So, that's why I fucking hated Kylo Ren. The fact is, he's just cosplaying as Darth Vader. He's just a kid who idolizes his grandpa. And he's supposed to be our main villain. Hopefully Supreme Leader Snoke will be interesting. Okay, so let's just basically wrap this up quickly. I can get past how annoyed I was at the fact that Rey literally used the Jedi mind trick on a stormtrooper without even knowing that it was possible. Luke didn't use a Jedi mind trick on anybody until the third movie, after seeing that it was possible in the first movie. And it's like, she basically just tells the stormtrooper to let her go and drop his weapon. And it's just like, why? How is it that suddenly she has the confidence that this is going to work? Why? And the fact that Daniel Craig is that fucking stormtrooper. Disney, what are you doing? You realize that you're going to have to pay Daniel Craig a much higher fee than some rando, right? What are you doing wasting a cameo like this with an actor like him in such a pointless role? So, bunch of nonsense happens with the assault on Starkiller Base. Finn and Han and Chewie capture Captain Phasma and make her lower the shields at gunpoint. Yeah, it would really be hilarious if that chrome finish on her suit wasn't just to make her suit look shiny and distinctive, but was actually a highly specified armor that was in fact laser bolt proof, As in, you could literally try to shoot her and it wouldn't do anything. That would be stupid, right? It would basically make the idea of her lowering the shields because she's being held at gunpoint completely laughable, right? Right? It would be stupid if she actually lowered the shields instead of, like, using the control panel to alert everyone that there are intruders on Starkiller Base. I don't know why she actually doesn't do that. So after she lowers the shields, they decide, hey, let's throw her in a garbage compactor. And that's the last we see of Captain Phasma, because, literally speaking, it would be stupid if she came back in the next movie with no explanation, right? Because, effectively speaking, she's going to be thrown into the trash compactor with no communication device on her, while the station is on high alert that they are under attack, and the station gets destroyed. Who the hell is going to check some random garbage compactor to find out if the commander is in there? Who the hell is going to have the time to rescue her while the base is under attack? Who? Answer me. Who? Who? So it would be stupid if she just came back with no explanation, no rhyme or reason. Yep, what a friggin' great character. Really got your mileage out of Brienne of Tarth right there. And we learned so much about Captain Phasma through her character and her actions. Yep, we learned so much about Captain Phasma through her character because she's the one stormtrooper that gets to wear shiny armor, and her actions where she lowered the shields. She was held hostage and obeyed the enemy because she was being held at gunpoint despite wearing laser-proof armor. Yeah. Oh my god, what a waste of a concept. It's so ironic because Captain Phasma was actually how I confirmed that the trailers for The Force Awakens were real and not just some fan trailer. I was about to call it fan trash because I didn't want fans to make any trailers for any upcoming Star Wars movies ever, but fans deserve better than to have their stuff called trash. This actually does not. So, oh my god. So basically speaking, the fighters are on the outside trying to, like, run the trench in order to blow up Starkiller Base, and for some reason Han, Chewie, Finn, and Rey have to plant some explosives. No idea why. And that's where Han decides to confront Kylo Ren, and I was like, yep, this is where it happens. Brace yourself. I'm gonna admit, I actually tried to force myself to cry during this scene. I honestly thought that watching Han Solo die deserved some kind of emotional reaction from me. But I couldn't. 'Cause it didn't. I knew it was coming from literally halfway through this movie, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it because it's like, this is how Han Solo dies? It felt meaningless to me. And the worst part about it is, what actually got an emotional response out of me was the realization that, wait a second, Han Solo is dead on this planet that's about to be destroyed, with no chance of recovering the body, and Luke has yet to be on screen. We've only had a few brief scenes with Leia, and she had like a moment with Han and whatnot, but oh my god, this means that Luke, Han, and Leia are never gonna have another scene together. The one thing that everybody was waiting for, the thing that Disney was contractually obligated to do per Mark Hamill's request, they ruined it. They can't do it now. Han Solo can never be reunited with Luke Skywalker. We can never have that scene where the three of them hug, be back together again. That's what actually got a reaction out of me. But here's something that I just have to comment on. Kylo Ren's real name. Ben. He's Ben Solo. Disney, I know you think you're being clever, but you're not. This isn't clever. This is stupid, because it makes no sense. They named their son Ben. Why did they name their son Ben? Effectively speaking, for those of you who haven't figured it out, the idea that their son being named Ben is that he's named after Obi-Wan, Ben Kenobi. They're basically honoring Ben Kenobi's memory by naming their first son Ben. Except there's something wrong with that, because, for the one thing, Han only knew Kenobi for like a day at most, and clearly didn't think much of him. He thought he was just some crazy old man. Why would he name his first son after him? Leia had even less experience with Obi-Wan. She only knew him as General or Obi-Wan Kenobi. The only time she ever heard the name Ben was when Luke showed up and mentioned it. She never even met the man face to face. The only experience she had with Obi-Wan was to watch him die. So, why the hell is Princess Leia naming her first son after Ben? If anything, he should have been named Bail, after her stepfather, the man who raised him. Bail Solo. I could get behind that. It sounds weird, but what else is new for the Star Wars franchise? Whoa, I'm getting lightheaded. I think the rage is getting to me. I'm coming, Elizabeth. The only person that it would make sense who would name the child Ben is Luke. But Luke isn't Ben's father. He's his uncle. Why does his uncle have such power and authority of naming the son of his sister and her husband? He shouldn't. Realistically speaking, I wouldn't let any of my siblings name my first child. No, that's a responsibility of the parents. That's a privilege and honor of the parents. The uncle doesn't get a say in it. The uncle doesn't. Nope, not so ever. So why is he named Ben? Never explained. It makes absolutely no sense. Han had no relationship with Obi-Wan. Leia had no relationship with Obi-Wan. The only one who had a relationship with Obi-Wan that would name him after Obi-Wan is Luke. And as far as I'm concerned, naming him Ben is a besmirchment of the Kenobi name. So, Kylo kills Han. They can't recover Han's body. They run out into the woods, and Kylo chases them with a lightsaber. And here's basically one of the most disappointing things about the movie. You see, I knew that they were going to have a female protagonist for this movie. I accepted it because it's like, that's just a thing nowadays. It would be interesting because at least it would be something different from the original trilogy. And believe you me, guys, anything that this movie did differently from the original trilogy, competently, I should add, is all good in my book. And that's basically why, at this point, I'll talk about that once I'm done with the movie, but I just accepted that there was going to be a female protagonist because have something new. Try to have something new, am I right? When the trailers started popping up that showed Finn more predominantly than Rey, it showed Finn in the Stormtrooper outfit, it showed Finn wielding the lightsaber and fighting the guy with the baton, and even preparing to fight Kylo in this scene, I suddenly had a huge revelation that's like, oh, that's clever. It's not just gonna be about the girl. She's not just gonna be the only Jedi character. They're gonna have two. She and Finn, they're both going to be Force-sensitive. They're going to go at this together. They're going to be co-protagonists. That's going to be cool. How is it going to be? Like, it's going to be like they're going to be friends, but they're also going to have this sort of rivalry with, like, I don't know, maybe Finn comes to the Force more naturally, or maybe Rey comes to the Force more naturally, and they both have different experiences, and they try to learn how to wield the Force and whatnot. They're both going to be Jedi. That's cool. That's a subversion, because now you don't have just one Jedi hero character, you have two. I mean, sure, like in the prequel trilogy, you had tons of Jedi, but it was mostly about Anakin and his fall from being a hero. And it was about Luke learning how to be a Jedi and rise up as a hero. Now you have two Jedi who can help each other learn. Like, it's that old saying from Ninjago, steel sharpens steel, sibling sharpens sibling. They could train together, training partners, like brother and sister. That'd be cool! So, and that's why I got so heavily interested in Finn. Finn is probably the best thing about this movie because Finn has an actual character arc. The first time I ever started talking about this movie with a coworker who said that Finn was his least favorite part of the movie because Finn's a coward, I'm literally saying to him, that's the point. Finn has to be a coward because that's part of his character development. He starts out as a coward, but eventually he gets to a point in the movie where he's no longer a coward, where he's willing to stand up for what is right, or to be a hero, to protect the people he cares about. Finn's entire character throughout most of this movie is trying to run away from the First Order. Every single time there's an action scene, Finn wants to run away. He tries to run. He literally tries to leave Han Solo and Rey behind once Maz Kanata exposes him as a stormtrooper turncoat. He's like, I'm out of here. I want to run. I'm running away. I'm running away from the First Order. Then finally, after watching Han Solo die, trying to redeem this evil guy in the cloak who turns out to be his son, finally, this guy who's run away from danger the entire movie, who's been running away from the First Order, decides, no more running. I'm gonna stand and fight. I'm gonna honor what Han Solo just died for. And especially because of the fact that Kylo Ren uses the Force to throw Rey and knock her out. Now Finn understands he has no choice but to stand and fight to defend Rey, and that's a good thing. That's part of the character. Now he has no choice but to stand up and be a man, to be brave, courageous, to be a hero. He turns on Luke's lightsaber, and Kylo's like, that lightsaber is mine. It belongs to me. And he, of course, has to say it. He has to say it. Come and get it. And they start fighting. And it's a good fight, I admit. I mean, Finn doesn't do all that good a job, but of course he doesn't. He hasn't been trained yet. And then, the worst happens. He gets disarmed. Kylo punches him in the face and slices him across the back. We've never seen an injury like that. We've seen the damage that these lightsabers can do, and Finn just got cut across his spine. I mean, like, I didn't notice it the first time I watched the movie, but that could have been a serious crippling injury. And it's like, oh my god, is Finn okay? Is he going to be alright? Is he going to be in the next movie? And then, of course, the worst part about this scene is how much it was telegraphed. Because you basically knew what it was going to be. I mean, apparently, everybody except Mark Hamill knew what this scene was going to be as soon as the lightsaber started twitching as Kylo Ren tried to use the Force to pull it to him. Because Mark Hamill assumed that this was the scene where Luke Skywalker was going to show up out of nowhere. Yeah, that guy who was missing the entire movie, that the movie was somehow about an hour ago, who left a map for people to find him, he's suddenly going to show up on the secret Death Star planet and suddenly come in and save the day, right? Nope. Everybody with a brain knew that it was going to be Rey using the Force out of nowhere to draw the lightsaber to her. And she does a better job of taking the fight to Kylo, but it's clear that her lightsaber technique is sloppy. She doesn't really have the kind of finesse that a lightsaber duelist from the prequels has, which is only basically keeping her alive because Kylo Ren is an even worse duelist. You see him, he's making all these big flailing moves that leave him too exposed. And it's just basically like, this is like one of the worst lightsaber duels I have ever seen, to be honest, because Kylo Ren is too clumsy to the point where he can't beat this girl. It's like, ugh. This is the guy that we're supposed to be intimidated by. This is the guy that we're supposed to see as a legitimate threat. He's a joke. And the fact that she is even more of a joke than he is just goes to show what a big joke that he is. And then the fight has to end. The fight ends with the planet literally falling apart, Kylo pushing against Rey, trying to force the crossguard onto her, and says, "You need a teacher. I can show you the ways of the Force." She blinks. The Force? So all this time, she didn't even know that she was using the Force. So what did she think she was doing? Like, what the fuck? She was using the Force purely on instinct, and now that she's consciously trying to use the Force, she starts overpowering Kylo, who actually knows and has been using the Force this entire time. She literally overpowers him to the point where she cuts across his face and knocks him down, to the point where if she wanted to, she could easily finish him off right then and there. But then suddenly, the planet literally splits open, separating the two. I'm going to take a line from Decker Shadow's review of this movie. If your final battle has to end with the planet literally separating to save your main villain from your main hero, you kind of have destroyed any tension for future entries in the franchise. You done fucked up. You know what I'm kind of surprised as? How little R2-D2 played in this movie. Literally speaking, I thought that the BB-8 units were going to come in to replace the R2 series, and like, I don't know, maybe R2 would be rebuilt as BB-8. I literally thought that BB-8 was R2's replacement, but I expected that R2 would be in the movie in some way, shape, or form. But nope, they've just found him in sleep mode earlier in the movie, and at the moment that I saw that, I guaranteed he's going to wake up at the very end of the movie, and he's going to reveal to have the rest of the map to Luke. I guarantee it. Yep, that's exactly what happened, except even though I predicted it, doesn't mean that it makes any fucking sense. Why did he suddenly wake up? Who woke him up? What was the sequence of events that caused him to wake up? Was it Starkiller Base being destroyed? Was it Luke's lightsaber finally falling into Rey's hands? Was it the map coming back to the base? Because they had the map earlier and they brought it to the base. So why did he suddenly wake up? Anyways, how could I skip over one of the most infuriating parts of this movie? Chewbacca literally just watched his best friend get killed. And worse, get killed by a family member. Princess Leia, who has known Chewbacca for years, knows that he's Han Solo's best friend, who was married to Han Solo, who literally felt his death from across the galaxy. She is mourning for the loss of her husband, and the fact that her son killed him. And yet, when they finally reunite on the Resistance base, she literally just cold stones Chewie. They walk right past each other. Chewbacca is the closest friend that you have right now, woman, and he just lost his best friend. You both should be crying into each other's arms, trying to comfort each other, but instead, you walk up to the girl that you don't even know, and you hug her instead. This just goes to show that there was some kind of massive rewrite with this script, that something was just rapidly slapdashed together in order to make some kind of cohesive narrative that still doesn't make sense. This is what happens when you basically write a completely by-the-numbers movie, a by-the-numbers Star Wars movie that's meant to introduce Star Wars to a general fucking audience. We'll be getting to that in a few minutes. So, we have the completed map to Luke Skywalker. And I just can't help but wonder. You basically have this huge friggin' map of the galaxy that has a dotted line that leads to a point where the search for Luke trailed off. What you have in that map is a missing piece that is probably just a small quadrant of the galaxy. How many planets do you realistically think could be in that area of the missing portion of the map? Are you guys seriously telling me that you guys had this map for the longest fucking time, and you never once thought to maybe send out a few search parties to search the planets one by one and trying to find Luke? I mean, sure, You'd have to search the entire planets, but let's face it, searching an entire planet doesn't fucking mean anything in this franchise when the moment that you immediately land on a planet, you find immediately what you're looking for. So, now that they have the completed map to Luke Skywalker, they of course send out their best pilot and their best ship to go and find him. Oh, you thought that I meant Poe Dameron? Nope. They're actually sending out Rey, someone who had absolutely no stake in finding Luke Skywalker from the get-go. Someone who just wanted to go back to Jakku to wait for her parents to show up for her. Yeah, because people who left you to die on a desert planet that haven't shown themselves for almost 20 years, they're totally gonna come back for you one day. Rey's motivation is so fucking stupid. I fucking hate it. Because it's like, that girl needs a fucking wake-up call. Okay, so the worst part about it is they're sending Chewie in the Millennium Falcon with Rey. Now, they're not sending Rey, they're letting Rey tag along. Because you would think that Chewie, being a friend of Luke, would have more ability to convince Luke to come back. Hell, why the fuck aren't they sending his sister, his twin sister, his biological blood relative, to come and convince him to come back? And suddenly, you realize that, wait a second, Luke has the Force. He knows, he can sense when bad things happen. He should know about all this bad stuff that's happening. Did he feel anything when Han died? He should basically have been there. He shouldn't have been hiding on whatever island waiting for somebody to come find him. He should have been there. So, you finally arrive on the missing planet. Turns out its name is Octu. We're going to learn about that later. And, literally speaking, you have Rey land on this island. She climbs up the mountain. And it's exactly as I predicted. The movie ends as we see Luke Skywalker. And I gotta admit, seeing Luke in this movie got an emotional rise out of me. Even though the music in the scene is the only thing doing the acting. The problem was, the movie left me so dissatisfied that I wasn't emotional at actually seeing Luke for the reason you might expect. The reason why I got emotional when I saw Luke as an old man with a gray beard is because I suddenly realized that Weird Al Yankovic was right. After all this time, his prophecy came to fruition. I know that I'll be coming back someday. I'll be playing this part till I'm old and gray. The long-term contract I had to sign says I'll be making these movies till the end of time with my Yoda. Yo, 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 Yoda. I honestly didn't think that The Last Jedi could somehow make that situation even more fitting, but it did. Seeing Luke as an old man and realizing that Weird Al Yankovic was right, and suddenly realizing that this is Luke Skywalker, and we saw Luke Skywalker as not just a teenager and a young man, but also as a newborn baby as well, and now we're seeing him as an old man, that got a reaction out of me. And that's where the movie ends. I gotta admit, I fell for the spectacle. I left that movie with mixed feelings, thinking that, okay, so it wasn't all that great, it was definitely a spectacle, but it wasn't exactly bad either. I left the movie with mixed feelings, and yet it only took me the walk to the nearby Walmart from the movie theater, a walk that was about 15 minutes, in the cold, I might mind you, to realize that, oh my god, that movie was awful. I fucking hated it. Literally speaking, the movie is too derivative. And The movie had barely any original ideas of its own, and worst of all, the few original ideas that it had are laughably stupid. The idea that Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber has suddenly been recovered after it was lost on Bespin, and now it has some sort of cosmic significance, like it's the fucking sword in the stone. Like, lightsabers didn't have this kind of significance before. They're a part of the Jedi's journey, but they're not supposed to be these magical things. The Force is the magic, the lightsaber is the tool. I just didn't like how they basically wanted to force this idea onto lightsabers like this. The characters in the movie are entirely derisive of everything derivative that had come before. Maz Kanata, she's just an annoying orange version of Yoda. And it's just like, ugh. They couldn't have come up with something, I don't know, different, something that wasn't going to make us automatically think of Yoda in this situation. Why couldn't they have done something smarter than this? They even go to a fucking cantina, and it's like, literally speaking, you're ripping off so many things at this point. Literally speaking, if you were to put the titles of every single Star Wars movie on... Wait, no. If you were to basically put a brief synopsis of every single Star Wars movie on individual small pieces of paper and put those papers into a hat. And the goal is that you have one person pull them out randomly, read the synopsis of the movie, and have the audience try to guess which movie that comes from. Literally speaking, the plot of The New Hope would be pulled from that movie twice. Desert-dwelling loner teenager who dreams of adventure finds droid with valuable information on desert planet, needs to escape in the Millennium Falcon with Han Solo, meets wise old mentor figure who is killed by mysterious dark-cloaked figure who has long history with said character, all on a planet-destroying super weapon. The fact that the movie took so many story beats from the original Star Wars A New Hope, that just completely killed whatever investment I had in this movie. I couldn't get behind it anymore because I'd seen this movie already. Why am I making such a big deal out of this? Because, well, let me just basically go into it. This goes to show how shameless J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker really is. He's entirely derivative. He is incapable of coming up with new ideas of his own. And worst of all, Disney told him to do this. Because Disney decided that they wanted to change up Star Wars. They wanted to reinvent Star Wars for a general audience. And that is the point where we really should have realized that this trilogy was going to be shit, because JJ is good at appealing to a general audience. Appealing to a fan base, not so much. Because that's the problem with his Star Trek movies. The problem with his Star Trek movies is that they are action films, but they're brainless action films. They have nothing that actually feels up to the quality of what Star Wars originally was, and that's why fans of Oh, did I say Star Wars? I'm sorry, I meant Star Trek. I've been ranting and raving for so long now that I can't even keep my own thoughts straight. The simple fact is that they... His Star Trek movies are big spectacles, they're flashy, they have bright special effects, they have fucking lens flares, but they're completely brainless action movies. Effectively speaking, JJ thinks that they're good, they have good ideas, but they don't. He thinks that they're smarter than they are, but they really aren't. And that's basically like why I like them, because I confess, growing up, I didn't like Star Trek all that much. My brother was far more into it than I was, but when I started watching Star Trek, it's like, okay, that's alright, but it feels like there's a little too much babble. Like, there's too much talk and not enough action. And worse, when the action gets in, it's clear that, like, I don't know, Star Trek just didn't do it for me. Never really did anything for me. I appreciated some episodes, but when the Star Trek movies came around, I actually liked those a whole lot better. And it was because what I wasn't willing to accept at the time was that Star Trek was far more intelligent than I was willing to give it credit for. That it was a smartly written show, and I didn't appreciate it for its intelligence. I rewatched the original series, like the first few seasons when it was on TV, and I garnered a greater appreciation for not just how intelligent the show was, but how far it was willing to stretch its clearly minuscule budget. But the simple fact is that when the movies started coming out, I appreciated that the movies were more action-driven instead of, like, trying to be deep and philosophical and whatnot. And I gotta admit, I liked Into Darkness a whole lot more than Wrath of Khan because I just liked the intimidation factor that Benedict Cumberbatch brought to the Khan character. No offense to Ricardo Montalban, but Cumberbatch actually made Khan seem like a actual threat, a force to be reckoned with. Sure, Khan basically did that with his intelligence in the first movie, in his movie, The Wrath of Khan, and his introductory episode, Space Seed, but he made such mediocre mistakes that you honestly can't believe that this guy is a super genius at all. I mean, one of the things that I didn't like about Space Seed was that Khan's master plan to take over the Enterprise literally depended on getting one female member of the crew to fall in love with him. And it's like, what? That's stupid. That's stupid. But fans of the Star Trek franchise were telling me that the J.J. Abrams movies were no good. I still enjoyed them for being action movies. I'll still probably enjoy them for being action movies, but I'm willing to accept that in this situation, I'm not the fan. I'm not the expert. I'm the normie in this situation. So, I basically, don't really know what I'm talking about when it comes to the merits of Star Trek, what makes a good Star Trek movie. Which basically, reminds me of a rather hypocritical argument when it comes to Linkzilla, because literally speaking, Linkzilla says that he is a Star Trek guy that knows Star Trek a whole lot more than he does Star Wars, so that's why he doesn't like the J.J. Abrams movies, because they don't feel like Star Trek to him, and yet he's basically telling people who have an opinion about the new Star Wars movies to shut the hell up and not share their opinions, because he, as a non-Star Wars fan, somehow knows better that what makes a Star Wars movie. Yeah, after he literally just made the exact same argument about the Star Trek series. So the simple fact is that the making of these movies for a general audience was a mistake, because they're trying to pander to an audience that just wasn't going to be interested in Star Wars to begin with. And speaking of audiences that weren't going to be interested in Star Wars, I think I'll save that for the next part. They claimed that they wanted to, quote, reintroduce Star Wars for a new generation, for a new audience. And I'm just left thinking, this is the 7th entry in one of the biggest film franchises of all time, to the point where people who are unfamiliar with this movie are familiar with tropes and themes and even lines of dialogue from this franchise. And you think that someone who has been living out under a rock all this time, who has avoided watching episodes 1 through 6 all this time, is somehow going to decide to let The Force Awakens, the 7th movie in the franchise, be their introduction to this franchise? I'm sorry, but that just does not happen. There's nobody in the entire fucking universe that sees The Force Awakens as their first Star Wars movie. You want to know why? Because DVD and Blu-ray have been a thing for a while now. People can easily get access to the first 6 movies. They literally have no excuse to start the franchise at episode 7. And worst of all, when they actually do watch episode 7 and then go back and watch A New Hope, they're going to realize how badly you ripped off the first movie. I mean, sure, some of them might be stupid, spectacle, popcorn-driven popcorn movie yuppies that might say, yeah, it's the same movie, but this one's clearly better because it has better special effects. But think about it for a second. You're also trying to appeal to a younger audience, a new generation of fans. You do realize that that younger generation of fans are the children of the older generation of fans who are basically going to have to take them to see this movie, and it's highly unlikely that fans of Star Wars would have not shared Star Wars with their children before taking them to see these movies. I guarantee you that the children of Star Wars fans have already seen the Star Wars movies. There's literally no excuse for why this movie is too similar to A New Hope. Effectively, there was no excuse from the get-go, considering that you have the 7th entry in a long-running franchise that is supposed to be telling a continuous story, a plot, a story that is supposed to be following what the narrative from the beginning all the way to the end. And yet, what you instead choose to do is to literally make a movie that is the first movie all over again. That is inexcusable. There is no fucking excuse for why these movies should have the same fucking plot. The movie should have just stuck with being the search for Luke Skywalker. Hell, this movie needs such an entire narrative overhaul that one of my plans for the future video is to literally do a how it should have been, a complete rewrite of episode 7, because I have a really strong idea. And I can't wait to freaking get to that video, but I just don't really have the resources at the time. God, I'm so fucking hoarse. Okay, so in addition, now because the movie ended up so derivative, you remember what I told you, basically like about what on the last video about why I was excited at the possibility of a female protagonist, that maybe she'd end up being the niece of Luke Skywalker, the daughter of Han Solo and Princess Leia? Yeah, this might make me sound like a hypocrite, but I did a complete 180 on that watching the movie, because the movie ended up being so derivative of the original trilogy, it made me think that they have absolutely no good idea of their own. I suddenly did not want Rey to be a Skywalker or a Solo, and I especially didn't want Kylo to end up being her brother, because that would have just been another rehash of what came before. It would have been Disney showcasing that we're incapable of creating anything new for ourselves, so let's just do what came before yet again. It was bad enough that Kylo was already dressed as a discount Vader. I didn't want the whole, it turns out the bad guy is related to you, and you have this legacy. So, I ended up wanting Rey to be someone different. And here's honestly what irritated the crap out of me. Watching this movie. After watching this movie, actually. Because somehow or another, the fan base managed to get so obnoxious after this movie dropped. Because nobody in the world, except for a few, seemed to agree with me that this movie was not as good as we all thought it was. That basically speaking that it was even possible that people were fooled by the spectacle. Nope. Instead, everybody began theorizing about why Rey is so powerful with the Force. She's obviously going to be Luke's daughter. And I'm left thinking, okay, one, Luke is following a religion and a code of order that basically prevents you from getting married and having children. How the hell is she going to be his daughter? Yeah, you're basically going to say that Luke broke the rules just like his father, which led him to the dark side? I really don't think that Luke is going to make that mistake. Plus, you also have to consider that this would mean that Luke is such a bad parent that he abandoned his daughter on a desert planet for 20 years before disappearing and leaving the rest of the galaxy to rot. So then basically they started saying, oh, she's obviously going to be the daughter of Han Solo and Luke and Princess Leia, which means that Kylo Ren is going to be her brother, which makes shipping them really kind of gross because they could be related. And it's like, that also implies that, well, one, Han and Leia are such bad parents that they would abandon their child on a desert planet for seemingly no reason. Why would they keep the girl, why would they keep the boy but ditch the girl? Secondly, if she was their daughter, sure, they probably wouldn't recognize her because she's grown up, she's changed, but hearing that she comes from Jakku and she has a bond with the Force, that might have given them a moment of pause if they were her parents. So it fucking irritated me that people clearly weren't thinking about this. They were just spouting whatever fan theory, made sense to them, because if the movies were already this derivative, why would Disney, stop the shame train now? I wanted Rey to be someone completely different. I wanted her to have her own legacy that didn't infringe but didn't lessen the Skywalker's legacy. I honestly thought that in the next movie it would be revealed that Rey is actually the long-lost daughter of some kind of really powerful Jedi that managed to escape from Order 66. And hell, around this time I'm pretty sure that trailers for Rogue One started popping up, so I gotta admit, I was one of the people that believed that it was possible that Jyn Erso was gonna turn out to be Rey's mom, because why else would you do a spin-off like this? Why else would you introduce this female character if she's not gonna tie into the rest of the story? Because that would have been perfect. You establish Jyn in a spin-off movie so that she doesn't feel out of place when she comes into the main story. And then we can catch up on what Jyn has been doing for the last 30 years and whatnot. I thought that would be a good idea, and it would be revealed that Jyn is actually related. She comes from a lineage of Force users. So the Force is strong in her family, just like it is with the Skywalkers. And so, I didn't necessarily think that would actually be what Disney did, though, because, I don't know if the fans would accept that. I don't know if the fans would accept that there was another powerful Jedi out there that just didn't feature into the original trilogy at all, because they didn't exist until this trilogy was made, so they probably wouldn't accept that. They would only accept someone that they knew from the franchise, someone very powerful, and someone that could potentially be related to Rey. So, that's when I threw my theory into the ring, and I thought of two distinct possibilities. Now, I literally remember gaining this theory just, I'd say about a year after the Force Awakens, when it was clear that Jyn wasn't going to be Rey's mom. I started thinking about it, and I basically thought that this was the most likely scenario that they were going to go with that could completely explain why Rey is so OP with the Force and could open up a lot of potential storytelling threads with her. They would reveal that Rey was actually the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine. That possibly, it might be possible that Palpatine had some illegitimate children out there in the galaxy, and because he was such an evil man, and when the Empire was destroyed, dismantled, they lost everything and had to go into hiding, even to the point where they would need to abandon their own daughter in order to save their own skins. So, to me, that would have been the most likely scenario to introduce why Rey was so powerful, and I felt like that would be the most likely course that Disney would go. However, that would still leave open the idea that, like, the galaxy now has to be saved by a Palpatine, the guy that started all of this evil and badness. It ties together really well, but it kind of is weird having the Skywalkers have to depend on a Palpatine to carry on their legacy. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And so, even though I thought that was the most likely, I decided that the best case scenario, the best case but not the most likely case, would be that Rey would end up being the grandniece of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I thought that would be a cool idea because, as we all know with the way the Jedi operate, is that the Jedi end up taking Force-sensitive children from their families at the age of 3. Now, if Kenobi came from any kind of family that has any kind of prominence or whatnot, I feel like they would be a bit upset at the fact that they lost their 3-year-old son to a religious cult who now has, and they're probably never going to see him again. They're never going to have any kind of relationship with him. So who's to say that that means they have to suddenly stop having kids? They should have another kid almost immediately to carry on their family name so that they can have a child that they can actually raise as their own and hopefully not be force sensitive enough to trigger the Jedi into coming after them. So I imagined that Obi-Wan would have some long-lost brother or sister out there who would eventually have their own children, who would eventually go on to be the parents of Rey. And the Force sensitivity in Obi-Wan was so strong, but it would be latent over the next 2 generations until finally reawakening in Rey. That would even explain the title, The Force Awakens. It would be an idea. I thought that would be a clever idea because with all this talk about the Skywalker saga, it ultimately leaves out important characters. An important character that was a huge part of this that I feel is unfairly getting the shaft in all this. Obi-Wan. It's like, bring in Obi-Wan. Like, let him be a part of this. Bring in Ewan McGregor to come in as Obi-Wan's Force Ghost. Literally, either dye his beard and his hair white, or let him do what Anakin got to do. Come back as a younger Force Ghost. Special edition motherfucker. It would have been cool. It would have been the best case scenario. It would have been something that wouldn't basically leave such a bad taste in the mouth, because it would be the Skywalkers and the Kenobis. 2 families reunited in this huge legacy as they try to bring peace and justice to the galaxy. The Skywalkers and the Kenobis together again. I think what even irritated me even further was all the Snoke theories, because Snoke, in my opinion, was something so lame that he didn't even need justification. You literally wasted your time and your breath trying to justify this guy. He is literally nothing more than a discount Palpatine. Although, I gotta admit, I did have my own curiosities about it, because a lot of people thought he was going to be Darth Plagueis, and, like, I looked at artwork of Darth Plagueis, and it's like, that's not what Darth Plagueis looks like. Muns have very narrow faces. They're the banking clan guys. Higo Damask had a very large forehead, and no nose. So why do you guys think that he's going to be friggin' why do you think he's Darth Plagueis? That's stupid. One idea I did have was basically, I looked at I looked at Snoke's wounds, and somebody else on the internet did. Somebody started this theory that somehow Snoke is some evil, ancient, dark side spirit that's possessing the corpse of Anakin Skywalker, and I'm like, what corpse? Anakin was cremated. And because, like, they looked at the wounds on Snoke's face, and it's like, they kind of look similar to the scars on Darth Vader's face and head, and it's like, that could entirely be coincidence. But I started thinking about that because one of the original drafts that was rumored to be for The Rise of Skywalker would be that Luke is being haunted, as in the new bad guy that has shown up in the galaxy has literally disguised himself. He's like donned his entire appearance to make himself look like Darth Vader as much as possible and claims to be Darth Vader just to screw with Luke's head. That Luke was basically slowly being driven insane by this person and possibly would need to go into hiding in order to get away from him. So because that was in the original script, that gave me an idea. What if that was like reincarnated into Snoke? What if Snoke is this guy that basically, like, because he's talking up Darth Vader so much to Kylo Ren, what if he intentionally mutilated himself to make scars across his face and head to make him look like Darth Vader, to make him resemble him as much as possible, in order to basically kind of strike that same chord of fear into Luke? But they didn't end up doing that either. The absolute one theory that I honestly didn't think that they would go with is that Snoke is just a failed clone of Palpatine. And the reason why I say that I never thought that they would go with that is because, one, if he was the clone of Palpatine, they would have literally said that from the get-go. They would have literally tried to tie this into the old trilogy as much as possible in order to basically let the fans know that, like, this is going to all tie together. It's not just some superfluous thing that we're doing. But nope. And I also thought that there's no way that they're going to make Snoke into a botched clone of Palpatine, because that was from a story in the expanded universe, and they cut the expanded universe from canon. They can't use the expanded universe's ideas. The whole idea of Palpatine coming back in the form of failing clone bodies that can't handle the force, the power of his dark side powers, the force of his dark side powers, that's from the expanded universe. That's from the Dark Empire comic series. They wouldn't do anything stupid like that. But yeah, so many things about this movie just friggin' irritated me, because I just hate the fact that so many people were blown away by the spectacle. I never really felt so utterly alone when it came to my dislike of this movie, and I kept thinking, how can all of you be so blind? This movie was awful. It was derivative. It was pointless. It literally gives us nothing but questions. Questions that I guarantee they have no interest in answering. You want to know what I actually thought that it was? It was the exact same thing that happened with The Phantom Menace. When The Phantom Menace came out in 1999, critics actually loved it, and fans actually loved it. The Phantom Menace was actually being hailed for its groundbreaking special effects. It was basically... And so many people were excited that a new Star Wars movie was back, and so people were, in a lot of ways, blinded by the spectacle. They were so happy that a new Star Wars movie had been made, and that they all kind of got caught up in the hype. But me, I saw through the hype. I didn't fall for the hype at all. And I just knew that eventually the hype dies down and people start seeing things for what they really are. All I had to do was wait. It might take a few years, but eventually people would finally get the sense that The Force Awakens really wasn't as good as everybody thought it was. And surprisingly, I actually didn't have to wait that long. I actually only had to wait 9 months. Or was it 10 by that point? You see, basically speaking, a good place to get a lot of modern-day political and social satire is South Park. And by God, even though South Park Season 20 was probably one of the worst seasons of South Park I ever fucking saw, it had one subplot in the entire season that I loved, that I immediately got behind. The reason that the season sucked so hard was because they focused too much on the fact that the 2016 election was happening, and they wanted to basically poke as many jokes as they possibly could at that. But the way that basically that season starts out is by making a commentary on J.J. Abrams. You see, there's a new phenomenon that's sweeping South Park called member berries. Member berries are basically these grape-like fruits that have high squeaky voices that are meant to remind you of how good the old days were. Basically kind of make you feel nostalgic for the old times. Remember Jurassic Park? Remember Star Wars? Remember Chewbacca? Oh, I remember. Like, basically all that stuff. They're meant to make you feel nostalgia for the things that you liked when you were a kid. However, Randy Marsh, that's Stan Marsh's dad, he gets the idea, he stumbles onto information that reveals that the member berries might not be the most healthiest thing. Sure, they basically remind us of good old days, but they kind of pose a necessary danger that basically it prevents us from moving forward as a society in a lot of ways. And all this is tied up with J.J. Abrams. Literally speaking, the first episode starts out with, basically speaking, girls wanting to do a silent protest by not standing or saluting the American flag during the Pledge of Allegiance. And literally speaking, like, so many people get upset about the fact that the girls are sitting out the American flag during the Pledge of Allegiance that they decide maybe the problem is the Pledge of Allegiance itself. We need a brand new Pledge of Allegiance, one that will inspire people to actually feel good about the Pledge of Allegiance again. So the town of South Park, or the U.S. government, I can't really be sure, they literally hired J.J. Abrams to write a new national anthem, or the Pledge of Allegiance, or whatever. And what does J.J. Abrams end up doing? He literally writes the exact same national anthem or pledge, whatever one it ends up being, and literally decrees that it doesn't matter if you stand or sit or salute it or not. So literally speaking, that's like a commentary on the Star Wars movie, as well as J.J. Abrams' work as a whole. Everybody thinks that he's some kind of visionary, when literally speaking, all he does is just remake exactly what has come before, and only changes it ever so slightly to literally make it meaningless. So, I'd say around the later episodes of the season, when basically speaking, one of the plots involving Mr. Garrison running for president as the Trump stand-in crosses over with the Randy Marsh subplot with the member berries, as well as the J.J. Abrams reference at the beginning. Randy tries to explain to Mr. Garrison what exactly is going on with the country, and he literally flat out says it. The new Star Wars movie wasn't as good as everyone thought. We might think that it's good to go back to a time when we were kids, where basically a magical wielding swordsman with a lightsaber could come in and save us. But the more we keep trying to bring back these old ideas, the less we move forward, the less progress that we make. and then eventually we hit stagnation. Now, basically, I'm trying to keep this, not really go into the true politics of, like, what's going on there, but I really appreciated this whole thing being brought up in the South Park episode, because it's not only just what Randy is saying about the Star Wars movie, it's also the poster of The Force Awakens, because suddenly you see how derivative the movie is, and basically, like, South Park is showing how derivative it is, because on the poster that they made in the episode, Kylo Ren's mask now looks more like Darth Vader, Starkiller Base looks more like the Death Star, Rey has been made to look more like Leia, so effectively, it's entirely derivative. It's just a rehash of the original Star Wars movie. And I really would have appreciated if that friggin' plot point had continued throughout the rest of Season 20. Unfortunately, Trey and Matt were putting their money on the wrong fucking horse to win the fucking election, and they immediately dropped that plot point, and it's just like, what was the point? What was the point of bringing up all this if you weren't going to actually resolve anything? You guys decided to make the seasons into serialized stories. You can't just leave us hanging like this. But nope, they said that the member berries all went over to Ready Player One, and it's like, fuck you guys. The simple fact is that The Force Awakens, it's all a big spectacle, but it really has no substance. Nothing that actually happens in the movie actually matters. It really is, and once you get past the flashy actions and special effects, the movie is tragically boring, because I'm too busy predicting everything that the movie is going to do, waiting, hoping beyond hope that it's actually going to show me something that'll impress me, that I honestly can't get invested in it. And that's why I can't watch the movie ever again, because it's so fucking stupid. It's completely baffling that they made this movie the way it is to begin with. The worst part about it is that the movie literally couldn't get me to care about anything. Like, literally speaking, like, once Starkiller Base was on screen, I literally stopped caring about everything that the movie did. And the reason for why that is because Star Wars, the original movies up until now, have used the spectacle to inform the substance in order to generate ideas about how this galaxy works. This is the galaxy, 30 years later. After all of the fighting has stopped, everything that our characters fought for and suffered through, this is the galaxy that they wanted to create. This is the new republic, the new democracy that had overthrown a dictatorship, and we know absolutely nothing about it. We know absolutely jack shit about how this galaxy works because we literally didn't see any of it. We literally only saw conflict. We saw the First Order. We saw the Resistance. That's it. You might as well have just called them Rebels versus Empire again, because there's literally nothing to this conflict whatsoever. There's nothing to this galaxy that ever changed. And that's why I didn't give a damn when Starkiller Base destroyed the New Republic, because it's like, there's nothing to get invested in. The New Republic might as well not even have been a thing, because it's already gone. Say what you want about the prequel trilogy, at least they give us a chance to view the galaxy in a small bit of peacetime before the war broke out. So many things that I feel like I should say, but nothing is coming to my mind right now. I've been doing this for almost 3 hours, and it's just... But what I find so laughable is the idea that so many people were banking on the sequels, the follow-ups to this movie. Everybody was saying, yeah, your viewpoints on this movie are justified because it does have some problems, but you know what? The sequel movies are going to make it better. The sequels are going to explain everything that this movie didn't explain, and the story is going to be better, and it's all going to be good. That sounds like someone who was under the assumption that Disney had a plan for these movies. But not only was the original treatment written by George Lucas completely thrown out, the guy that was originally hired to write this movie needed at least 1.5 years. They fired him, and they brought on J.J. Abrams, who wrote a script within 6 weeks. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of careful and meticulous planning went into this movie. So anyways, that's basically my thoughts on The Force Awakens. Can't wait to get to the rest of the series, and hopefully I keep it more succinct with future videos, because I don't want to basically waste my life rambling about these things, especially since, like, friggin' only got off work a few hours ago, and already my day is practically gone already. So, I hope that you've enjoyed this little rant on why The Force Awakens really isn't as good as people remember it. I'm glad that people are now starting to come around and realize that this movie really was shit, regardless of what The Last Jedi had to say about it. And join me next time for the next movie in Disney, under Disney's era, that turned out surprisingly to be the turtle in this race. See you next time. Later.